The night the bastards clashed outside the broken walls of Winterfell, the snow fell in choking sheets, erasing banners and faces alike. Arrows cut the storm in crooked strokes of shadow, and the roar of men and horses rose and died beneath the drift as if the wind itself were feeding. On a rise of trampled snow, Rickon Stark fled, barefoot, barehanded, breath burning like glass, while the bastards' arrows hissed around him. 1, then 2, then 3. Each shaft split the night with a wolf's whine, and the field seemed to tilt beneath their arc. But the wind had its own designs. A final gust caught the arrow meant for Rickon's heart, tipping the reed just enough that it clipped leather instead of flesh. Pain flared raw across his ribs, but life, stubborn and sharp, clung to the boy like a hungry direwolf. He staggered, lurched, rolled down the far side of a snowbank, disappearing from every eye that had wagered on his death. By dawn, the battle was done. Ramsay's dogs gorged themselves on corpses. Bolton banners crackled upon pikes. Jon Snow's battered legions searched for breath where none remained. Yet below the shifting dunes of snow, Rickon's pulse thrummed. He crawled through a tunnel of blood-soaked powder until the world smelled less of iron and more of pine, until dead men's cries faded behind a veil of birch trunks. Only then did he rise, clutching his side while ghost-white morning light draped the wolfswood. Summer was long dead, and Shaggy Dog too, but the bond between Wolf and Stark lingered as a shadow in the soul. Rickon felt it guiding him north, ever north, away from battlefields and oaths sworn by others. His feet learned to follow deer paths. His ears learned the tongue of ravens. When the sky bruised violet and black, he followed the sweetest smell he knew, smoke and meat, and found the camp of a free folk raiding band, 50 strong, led by a bone-thin spearwife who braided human knucklebones into her hair. She named herself Runa Crow-Eater. "And you're the pup Bolton was meaning to gut," she rasped while her warriors weighed his small shape against their hunger. "Why shouldn't we sell you back to the flayed man?" Rickon's voice, rough with thirst, answered in the only tongue that mattered. "Because I am Stark, and wolves return to their pack." The spearwife laughed, a sound like stones grinding. Yet among the free folk, laughter could become respect the way frost becomes ice. They bound his ribs, filled his belly, and by next moon's turn carried him beyond the wall, where no southern lord's law could reach. Deep within the haunted forests of the true north, where mammoth bones rose like cathedral columns and the aurora draped the sky in silent hymns, Rickon grew. His wound knitted into a rope scar. His limbs lengthened, hardened, learned to wield chipped obsidian and gut fish beneath glowworm light. The free folk taught him the names of every star, every ice river, every giant's grave. In return, he taught them the names of every Stark before him: Bran the Builder, Lyanna the Brave, Eddard the Just, stories told while embers crackled and wind howled like restless ghosts. 3 winters passed, each more brutal than song or prayer could soften. When blizzards swallowed whole villages and the sun fled for weeks, clans fell upon each other for meat and fire. Yet in the camp that Runa claimed, the wolf boy stood at the center, carving new runes on tattered standards. The direwolf of House Stark, black on white. He spoke of unity, of standing shield to shield instead of blade to throat. "South of the wall they see only wildlings," he said one night beneath a sickle moon. "Let them see wolves instead, wolves that hunt together." Runa narrowed her one good eye. "Words are wind, pup. Then I'll show you teeth." Rickon drew his hunting knife and sliced his palm. Blood steamed in the cold, bright as iron under torchlight. "Bind me as brother. I will bleed for you. Bleed with me." Warriors stepped forward. A raider whose child had frozen 2 nights earlier cut his wrist beside Rickon's. Then a spear thrower with cheeks tattooed in weirwood red. Then a giant-kin youth whose laughter shook snow from the pines. Their blood pooled upon a stone, smoking like a sacrifice to nameless gods. Word spread on the gale. The wolf boy was forging a pack. Far in the south, Jon Snow sat uneasy on Winterfell's high seat, crown of black iron pressing like remorse upon his brow. Ravencall brought tidings of skirmishes beyond the wall, of a free folk confederation forming like a storm cloud under the banner of a black wolf. Some maesters scoffed. Some northern lords muttered of impostors. Yet Sansa, Lady of the Vale now but still sister, touched the fresh parchment and whispered, "Rickon." Jon's breath caught. The dead do not return, he thought, but wolves wander far before finding the way home. He summoned his council, parchment crackling in his fist. "Whether free folk or Stark, they are Northmen," he said. "We will treat them as kin, or they will treat us as prey." The lords of Carhold and Last Hearth balked. "Let wildlings freeze," said Lord Serwyn. "They stole our sheep, our daughters, our lives." Jon's gray eyes hardened. "They fought beside us against the Night King. The wall fell, and ice demons walked, yet they bled the same red. I'll not forget." But for every lord who remembered the Dawnspire pact, 2 remembered burned farms. Whispers of rebellion crept like spiders. Beyond the ruins of Craster's Keep, Rickon's following swelled. Clans that had knifed one another for generations now huddled round his fires, drawn by tales of a king-wolf who carried the old blood of winter. He stitched skins into flowing standards, each daubed with a dire wolf devouring a kneeling crow, symbol not of night's watch, but of the kneeling of fear itself. Yet unity demanded more than songs. It demanded laws. Under the Council of Runa and the Giantkin, Rickon proclaimed the Pact of Teeth. No clan should raid another in needful winter. Disputes would be settled by single combat at dawn, not by slaughter of kin, and the child abducted by famine would be fed, not ransomed. The free folk were no strangers to harsh codes, but never had they bowed to them willingly. Some scoffed. One warlord, Scarlet Bear-Eater, mocked Rickon's youth and challenge. They met in a ring of antlers beneath Aurora Vales, firelight flickering across rows of carved skulls. Bear-Eater swung a club of frozen jawbones. Rickon carried only a wolf-bone dagger. When the first clash rang like church bells beneath the stars, Rickon slipped beneath the blow, the dagger singing across Bear-Eater's hamstring. 3 turns later the jawbone club lay in snow, its bearer kneeling, blood hissing against the ice. "Yield," Rickon growled, breath misting. "Live or feed the earth." Bear-Eater spat crimson, then bowed his head. Unity grew in blood and frost. In the long dark that followed, the free folk called Rickon Ice Skin. For the pale scar that veined his ribs like lightning, they carved the direwolf sigil upon spruce shields, upon children's cradleboards, upon the standing stones of ancient graves. And when they howled at the aurora, the night howled back. South of the shattered wall, Winterfell prepared for parley. Jon Snow, clad in sable and heartbreak, led a column of knights across frostbitten meadows to the shadow of the Frostfangs. At the spear tip of winter he saw them. Thousands of tents stitched from mammoth hide, ringed by watchfires that burned coal green with herbs unknown to maesters. Banners, wolf-devouring crow, whipped in the gale. And at their center, astride a white elk, sat a figure in direwolf fur cloak, a bronze circlet upon windswept raven hair. Rickon slid from the elk and walked across the snow, each step deliberate, like a drumbeat between worlds. Jon dismounted, heart hammering, memories of a toddler chasing a direwolf pup spilling through him like thaw. No herald announced them, no fanfare dared. Brothers met with nothing but the storm for witness. Rickon's eyes, feral gold and torchlight, flicked to the direwolf sewn on Jon's chest. A smile ghosted his lips. "Lord, no king in the north," he said, voice lower, older than Jon remembered. Jon swallowed, feeling the weight of ghosts between them. "Rickon, I thought, arrows cannot kill a wolf whose pack still calls." His gaze swept the knights behind Jon. "Do you come with iron or with bread?" "With both," Jon answered. "Iron if blood spills, bread if words hold." Rickon's laugh, sharp as splitting ice, broke the hush. "Then speak your words, brother. Bread tastes sweeter than steel." They spoke beneath a weirwood older than kingdoms, its red leaves drifting like embers. Jon offered grain stores, forged axes, land south of the Shivering Sea. Rickon countered with promise of sable furs, obsidian mines, and a wall of flesh against southern invaders. Yet true accord required trust. "There's a darkness rising east of Skagos," Rickon said, eyes narrowing. "Whites stirring in packs, guided by a thing that wears stolen skins. My scouts saw children taken in the night. The long night may have ended, but its shadow lingers." John felt the old chill crawl his spine. "We will ride together," he vowed. "Stark and free folk, one blade." But lords of the north whispered betrayal. Fear spread like rot. A conspiracy of holdfasts, Serwyn, Dustin, Lake, plotted to waylay Rickon's camp on the return march, to snuff the Wolf King before his crown could gleam. On the eve of departure, Rickon stood atop an ice ridge, gaze fixed upon the distant flicker where Aurora dipped toward the horizon. A promise of dawn or doom. Runa joined him, her breath aplume. "They'll strike," she said. "Southron's steel hungers for the unknown." Rickon's hand rested on the wolf-bone dagger. "Let them. A pack tests itself best with fangs at its throat." His smile was hard. "And wolves bite back." Torchlight glimmered below as free folk readied for march, slinging shields, harnessing elk, sharpening dragonglass. Across the snow sea, John's host waited, eyes wary yet hopeful. Two worlds poised on a knife edge. At dawn the first arrow sang. Not Bolton's this time, but northern, loosed from a treacherous ridge. It missed Rickon by a whisper, shattered upon Runa's antler helm. Trumpets howled. Hidden cavalry surged. Yet the free folk did not scatter. Shields locked in a crescent, their wolf banners rising like a tide. John spurred through the chaos, roaring for peace, but peace had fled. Snow erupted with hoofbeats, steel shrieked against obsidian, and betrayed oaths turned the frost crimson. Rickon moved through it like a storm's eye, parrying, slashing, rallying. Beside him the giant kin hurled boulders. Runa speared a knight clean from saddle. At the fray's heart, Lord Serwyn, pale hair stiff with frost, charged Rickon, lance leveled. The boy king sidestepped, dug a heel, and the lance kissed empty air. In that heartbeat Rickon drove his dagger under Serwyn's gorget. Blood fountained black. The horse reared, Serwyn toppled, and the northern host faltered. John's voice cut the din, raw as wind over gravestones. "Enough!" He reined before the last shield wall, torn cloak snapping. "Drop blades or answer to the king you swore." A hush, brittle and sudden. Knights glanced at fallen Serwyn, at crimson melting into white. One by one swords hit snow, ringing mournfully. John's shoulders sagged. Rickon met his eyes across the silence. "You see now," he said softly. "Unity costs blood, whether free or kneeling. But blood spilled together can bind stronger than chains."
Jeune Noded, applique accord.
He raised Rickon's hand high, bloody dagger glinting. "I name Rickon Stark, son of Winterfell, warden of the true north," he called. "Let any man who steals his lands answer to me." A ripple of voices, hesitant but growing. "Stark! Stark!" Free folk took up the cry, wordless ululations swelling into a thunder that shook frost from pine. For the first time in memory, wildling and lord roared the same name. They marched south as one army, campfires mingling, tales shared over bowls of hare stew. Rickon walked among free folk children who braided wolf charms in his hair, among northern squires who stared with wary awe. The night's silence felt new, like untrodden snow. Yet beyond Skagos, the darkness he had spoken of stirred. A skin changer in stolen flesh sensed the forging of unity and felt it as a threat. In ice caverns lit by corpse fires, it whispered to dead things that still remembered hunger. Wolves may unite, but the night is patient. In Moat Caelan's shadow the pact was sealed. John knelt before the moss-strangled stones, swear words springing mist from his lips, and Rickon pressed his wounded palm to John's. Stark to Stark, king to king wolf. Raven ink-signed parchment. Feast fires blazed. Barrels of northern ale foamed beside casks of pine sap mead brewed beyond the wall. Sansa rode from the Eyrie to witness. Her eyes glistened as she embraced her youngest brother, hair smelling of wolf fur and pine. "You smell like stories," she murmured. "I've lived a few," he answered, gaze drifting to the sky where ravens circled. That night, dancing lanterns strung from weirwood boughs cast shifting constellations upon faces both scarred and innocent. Free folk drums thumped while Winterfell pipers played the slow, mournful air of the North remembers, and Rickon, in a cloak of dire wolf pelts, watched from the parapet, feeling the weight of 9 and 10,000 hearts beating a single rhythm. Unity, fragile as a snowflake, glinted beneath the lantern glow. A fortnight later, crows swarmed the skies above Last Hearth, wing beats frantic. Messengers thundered to Winterfell with tongues frozen and eyes wild. "Dead things," they gasped. "Dead things walking again." Jon felt cold dread coil. The Night King lay shattered, but Death's servants lingered like embers in ash. He summoned Rickon and his captains. Maps spread, candles guttered. "The threat rises east," Rickon said, finger tracing ragged coastlines. "If we ride swift, we can strike before it swells." Runa slammed her spear butt. "Free folk will march. North remembers its own." Steel-clad lords glanced at one another, fear warring with shame. Finally Lord Manderly rumbled, "Winterfell stands or falls. Together." So banners ascended the wintry wind. Direwolf, trout, kraken, bear, all trailing behind the wolf-devouring crow of Rickon Stark. An army unlike any in memory spilled across the Frostfang passes. Giant kin beside Karstark knights, spearwives beside Manderly lancers, bound by a promise forged in treachery's blood. Along the fringes of that host trotted white direwolves, offspring of Ghost and the last surviving she-wolf of the free folk. Their howls braided through the dark, heralding a new song of ice. The first skirmish erupted at the fangs of Skagos, where midnight seas hammered cliffs. Whites clambered from caves, eyes blue as glacier hearts, 1,000 lifeless throats moaning in unison. At their head stalked a figure in patchwork skins. Wolf, bear, even human, stitched over bleached sinew. It raised a staff tipped with weirwood carved into a screaming face. Rickon rode forth, wolf-bone dagger traded for a Valyrian shortsword gifted by Jon. Obsidian arrowheads rattled in his quiver. Giants flanked him, their clubs ablaze with pitch. When the skin changer shrieked, the dead charged and the earth trembled. Spears of dragonglass shattered brittle bones. Fire took the rest. But the whites kept coming, each new corpse rising from snow as if the storm itself birthed them. Rickon fought until arms ached, until vision swam red. He saw Runa pulled under 3 corpses, saw a giant topple roaring. Yet the skin changer stood, unmarred. Desperation flared wolfish in Rickon's gut. He snatched a burning brand and hurled it. Flame licked patched furs, but the creature laughed, a sound like cracking ice, and lifted its staff. Shadows writhed, and half-frozen whites surged anew. "Form on me," Jon roared, slashing through the press to Rickon's side. Together they cut a path, steel and dragonglass singing. The skin changer's eyes burned an unholy sapphire, its mouth twisted in mockery. Rickon saw a glimmer of bone beneath patchwork, human skull gleaming behind wolf sinew. He lunged, short sword glinting. The creature parried with the staff, sparks spitting. Snow churned, hearts thundered. Jon feinted left, Rickon dove right. Their blades crossed, severing the staff in a burst of weirwood splinters. The whites froze mid-lunge, heads snapping toward the broken staff as if leashes snapped. A heartbeat's hush, and then the dead collapsed like puppets whose strings were cut. Across the battlefield, silence fell so sudden the sea's roar seemed hushed. The skin changer shrieked, a last defiant wail, but Jon's long claw sheared through skull and silence both. Blue fire guttered, darkness fled. Victory bore a cost. 50 northern dead, 70 free folk, and 2 giants. Pyres blazed bright, smoke mingling with aurora and salt spume. Rickon stood before the flames, ash drifting like black snow upon his shoulders. Jon joined him. "The dead thing wore many skins," he murmured. "A warning." Rickon's jaw clenched. "A test. Darkness hunting cracks in our pack. We must close them." He turned to the gathered host, voice rising above the crackle of flame. This night, ice tried to divide us, dead set against the living. We answered as wolves, one heart, many teeth. Let no one, living or dead, rip this pack asunder. You bled for me and I for you. From this night we are bound not by fear but by tooth, claw, and flame. Let the winds carry our howl from Winterfell to the shadowed seas. The North is one. Response thundered back. Thousands of throats howling, fists beating shields. The flames roared higher, and the aurora above writhed in ribbons of emerald and crimson, as if the sky itself saluted. Through the next moons, Rickon's banner flew beside Jon's on every rampart from Deepwood to Eastwatch. Trade caravans wound north and south. Obsidian for barley, silver fox pelts for wrought iron. Free folk children learned words of Southron tongues in Winterfell's courtyard. Northern squires learned to track by giant footprints. Yet peace must feed on vigilance. Rumors seeped from shattered castles east of Skagos, of a warlock coven nursing the last shred of the Night King's will, of a horn carved from the ribs of an ice dragon, meant to tear down walls of stone and spirit alike. Rickon listened, eyes distant. Walls, he said, are only as strong as the men who guard them. Better to be wolves without walls, ever watchful. So he forged the Watch of the Wolf. Scouts mounted on elk and direwolf, patrolling frost rivers and haunted fjords, carrying horn calls that could span leagues. Their cloaks bore no color but snow gray. Their oath bound them to neither North nor free folk but to the living. And at their head rode Rickon, Ice Skin, with Runa and the giant kin, seeking the horn before darkness found breath again. In Winterfell's Godswood, Sansa prayed beneath red leaves. She saw the North healing, markets where once were gallows, songs where once were screams. Yet she also saw chairs left empty at feast boards, scars never quite fading. Rickon's path was one of peril, every step deeper into wild dark. She feared losing him again. One frost-silver dawn, as ravens muttered of distant storms, Sansa and Jon stood upon battlements watching Rickon's host ride out. The boy king glanced back only once, stroking the neck of his white elk, eyes soft yet blazing. He was born with wolf blood, Jon whispered. Can't pen that spirit. Sansa sighed, clasping his gloved hand. Then may the north wind carry him home. Their intertwined shadows stretched across Winterfell's stones, two shapes made whole only by the empty space between them. Space where a younger brother strode into legend. The Frostfang glaciers groaned like slumbering gods as Rickon's company pressed on. Night after night they fought pockets of the restless dead, smaller but cunning, as if some guiding will studied their tactics. In an ice-wound cavern lit by black torches, they found glyphs burned into the walls, spiral sigils twisting into a hiss of blue flame at the touch of warm breath. It whispered of the Horn. Somewhere east, across the shivering strait upon the Isle of Skane, where wargs were said to drown themselves to see the future. Rickon vowed to sail. Elk-drawn sleds hauled timber to an icebound inlet. Free folk shipwrights, descendants of raiders, hewed pine and sinew into shallow draft longships. The sea moaned beneath shelves of ice, foam freezing mid-splash. On the eve of departure, Jon arrived with 100 knights. "I'll not let you sail into death alone," he said. Rickon clasped his brother's forearms. "If I fall, hold the north." "And if I fall?" Jon asked. Rickon's smile was bleak, young. "Then the wolves will remember." They launched at dawn, sails stitched with black wolf sigils catching a wind sharp as shattered glass. The fleet glided through mist so thick it swallowed masts. Runa prowled the prow, spear gleaming with dragonglass. Giants huddled on deck, uneasy upon shifting boards. And Rickon stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond mortal sight. Hours bled into days in the white void. Men whispered of ghost whales singing beneath the hulls, of icebergs that drifted against the current as though steered by unseen hands. One night the moon bled red upon the sea. The next, no moon shone at all. On the sixth dawn the fog shredded, revealing Skane, a jagged island where cliffs stabbed clouds and forests lay petrified in eternal frost. Smoke coiled from fissures in the ice like breath from a buried beast. They made landfall beneath a ring of stone monoliths carved with faces screaming in silence. Snow crunched beneath boot and paw. The chill here bit deeper, numbing even Rickon's wolf blood. And somewhere inland, a horn's low moan echoed, a sound older than language. Their path wound through canyons of frozen ash. Shapes lurked in peripheral vision, limbs too long, eyes too still, but none attacked. Rather, the land itself seemed to watch, waiting. At twilight, they reached a crater where ice formed spirals descending to a central altar of black stone. Upon that altar rested a horn the size of a kraken's thigh, ribbed with pale crystal, bound in rings of twisted weirwood. Runa hissed, "The horn of hollow frost." A giant stepped forward, reverence softening thunderous feet. Rickon drew nearer. Frost flowers bloomed across the horn's surface with every breath. As his hand hovered, wind shrieked through the crater, stirring snow into snarling faces. Figures emerged from the blizzard, whites clad in ragged furs, eyes burning. At their foreground walked a warlock draped in an ice silk robe, skin translucent as glacier glass, veins glowing eldritch blue. "Stark cub," it rasped, voice echoing twice. "Leave the horn. Embrace eternity's chill." Rickon's answer was the whisper of Valyrian steel clearing scabbard. Battle erupted like lightning against still sky. Dragonglass cracked bone, Valyrian steel cleaved frostflesh. Yet the warlock seemed to weave the blizzard itself. Each swing met only drifting snow. It raised hands, and shards of ice speared from ground, impaling two warriors. Rickon darted, rolled, struck. Steel met nothing. The warlock laughed, a sound so cold his eardrums throbbed. But giants know patience. One, wounded yet steadfast, waited until the warlock coalesced to strike. Then it brought down a club of petrified pine with the weight of falling moons. Ice exploded. Warlock shrieked, form scattering into a cloud of ragged snowflakes. In the hush that followed, Rickon seized the horn. Cold sang through bone and blood, promising oblivion. His breath iced. "Break it," Runa urged, eyes wide. But Rickon felt another pull, a heartbeat echo inside, as though Shaggy Dog's spirit growled caution. "Destroy the power and it is gone. Claim the power and it is bound." And wolves, he knew, bound what they must to safeguard their den. He wrapped the horn in direwolf fur, burying its glow. "We carry it to Winterfell," he said. "Better in a wolf's den than in the night's maw." They burned the dead, salted the ashes. The snow seemed less hostile on the return march, as if the island itself exhaled relief. Upon sailing into White Harbor, the fleet found banners flapping at half-mast. Maester ravens had carried grim tidings while they braved the shivering strait. Queen Daenerys Stormborn had died in distant Valyria, her dragon slain by assassins unknown. The continent beyond the narrow sea burned in succession wars. Refugees fled by the thousands, ships cramming every port. The north, long isolated, now faced a tide of souls and swords that could drown its fragile peace. Jon's council split, some urging closed gates, others mercy. Rickon, horn still hidden, spoke last. "The north has room for those who bear no malice. We who were once called wildlings know the sting of exile. Let us be refuge, but on our terms." He proposed settlements along the gift lands, abandoned farms revived by foreign hands, guarded by the watch of the wolf. Trade would flow. Valyrian glasswork for Wintertown grain, Myrish silks for icicle iron. Culture seeding culture. Sansa saw the wisdom and Jon the necessity. So the north opened its gates, while southerners muttered of wolves welcoming lambs. Among the refugees came whispers, of a sect seeking the horn of hollow frost to channel dragon spirits, of agents who killed Daenerys hoping to harness draconic fire against northern ice. Eyes turned to Winterfell, where rumor said a Stark prince returned from death held such power. Rickon grim smiled. Unity, he thought, required stronger teeth. Word soon spread of skirmishes along the King's Road. Masked cultists in bone masks ambushing caravans bound for the north, seeking the wolf horn. The watch of the wolf rode, swift as gale, quelling raids, leaving none alive to spread plague of fear. Yet it was a matter of time before conflict tore the patchwork piece. At Winterfell's heart, beneath crypts older than Old Town, Rickon descended alone. Dust cloaked the stone wolves. Candleglow flickered across faces lost to memory. Before Lioness' statue, he set the horn and knelt. "What price?" he whispered. "To keep my pack safe?" Echo answered with silence, but in that still hush Rickon felt shapes stirring at the edge of sense. Ancestors pacing just beyond vision. He pressed his palm to the horn. Frost-kissed flesh. Images burst. Ice dragons coiling above molten skies. Walls shattering. Wolves tearing through white storms. When he opened his eyes, he knew. The horn was not merely a weapon to break walls. It was a gate. Blown once, it could shatter barriers between worlds of living and dead, cold and flame. Blown thrice, it could open passage for powers lost since the Age of Heroes. He understood why the warlock coveted it, why fate guided him to claim it. It must never sound. So he bound it in chains of Valyrian steel, sealed with runes etched by the children of the forest. Knowledge gleaned from cave paintings and whispered spells Runa taught him. He hid it beneath the weirwood roots, in a hollow warded with dragonglass shards and wolf's blood. But secrets breed shadows. One night a raven arrived bearing black wax unknown to maesters. Message scrawled in twisting glyphs. "We hear the howl. We come." It burst into flame in Jon's hand, ashes cold against skin. Scouts soon reported a host sailing from Essos, black-hulled galleys adorned with dragonbone and iron. Their leader, a woman clad in scales of obsidian, called herself Valysa Pyrestone, last of the Shadowbinders of Ass-High. She sought the horn of hollow frost, claiming it a shard of the song of fire and ice fated to crown a queen of Shadowflame upon the ashes of Westeros. Jon summoned northern banners. Rickon rallied free folk. Refugee militias armed with crossbows of Myrish steel drilled in streets of White Harbor. Winterfell's walls bristled with scorpions made of black oak. The night Valysa's fleet anchored in the Bight. The sea glowed sickly green. Fish floated belly up. Her emissaries, faces half-shrouded in scaled veils, demanded the horn within 3 days or they would lay waste by sorcery and wildfire taken from Kartha's forbidden vaults. Winterfell answered with silence, then steel. Jon rode south, a host of 12,000 at his back, to bar the King's Road at Moat Cailin. Rickon marched east over the hills, wolves shadowing his stride, to harry the invaders' inland flanks. Between them lay the fate of the fragile realm. Valysa Pyrestone proved as cunning as cruel. She unleashed vessels packed with wildfire casks piloted by thralls, their hulls aflame as they slammed Wintertown docks. Emerald infernos devoured warehouses. Smoke filled the sky like dragon wings. Refugees panicked. Order teetered. Rickon, returning from a raid on the enemy's rear camp, saw the glow licking the horizon. His chest burned with fury colder than ice. He spurred the elk, broke into a gallop that swallowed miles like heartbeats. Within the outer bailey chaos raged. Archers on ramparts loosed at Shadowbinders conjuring torrents of black flame. Free folk spearwives herded civilians toward wells. Direwolves dragged injured from burning houses. Above it all, Valysa herself hovered upon a platform of shimmering air, hand raised high, chanting in a tongue of smoke. Rickon climbed the gate tower, leapt to a ballista arm, vaulted onto the wall's edge, and from there flung himself into open air toward the sorceress. Wind howled, the platform quaked. Valysa's eyes widened as Wolfchild met Shadowflame. They crashed upon the parapet, her spell shattering like glass. Valysa drew twin daggers forged of obsidian and shadow. Rickon met them with Valyrian steel. Sparks spattered. The battle below paused, breath held by thousands. Steel rang, obsidian hissed. Valysa struck with serpent speed, but Rickon's reflexes were honed by giant clubs and blizzard hunts. He feinted left, slashed right, carving a line across her scaled cuirass. Shadow seeped from the wound instead of blood. Valysa laughed, voice like crackling bone. "You think life defeats death? Ice defeats flame? Fool, song needs both." She lunged. Rickon parried, but one dagger kissed his forearm, splitting flesh. Pain flared, but with it came memory. Arrow hiss, near-death flight, a brother's crown. He twisted, locking daggers, forced them wide, and drove his pommel into Valisa's throat. She reeled, hiss choking. Rickon kicked her backward, over the wall's edge. She plummeted into wildfire-lit night. Shadow flame erupted where she struck, but the sorceress did not rise. Her army, seeing their star fall, broke. Northern knights cut them down upon the King's Road. Free folk harried their route through marsh and fun. Within a fortnight, the invaders were nothing but stories told around Winterfell hearths, warnings of dragons that dared challenge wolves. Yet the cost was steep. Wintertown smoldered, livelihoods burned. In its ashes, Rickon ordered a new city, Freehold, where Northmen, free folk, and refugee kin would share governance, each guild led by Triune Council. A city of 3 peoples, root of a dream. Jon watched construction begin. Beams hoisted by giants beside cranes built by Pentoshi engineers, and felt a thaw in his heart. The realm his father died for was being reborn, not of iron and ice alone, but of people's will. Years turned. The Watch of the Wolf grew into a legion, patrolling as far as Bear Island's misted coves to Skagos' jagged peaks, keeping trade lanes safe. Children of refugee and raider played together beneath heart trees, their songs mixing free folk drums with northern lutes. Grain from Rezone fields fed Winterfell and Freehold alike. Rickon's legend spread. Bards in Old Town sang of the Wolf King beyond, of unity carved from blood and snow. Some tales called him harsh, others kind, but all agreed on one truth. He ruled by pact, not crown, and by memory stronger than iron. In the quiet hush of each dawn he walked the godswood, touching a young direwolf that slept at his side. Midnight, pup of Ghost and the she-wolf. He would pause at the weirwood, gaze distant as if seeing future storms. For though the horn lay chained in roots, its call pulsed faint as a heartbeat beneath the earth, waiting for lips bold or foolish enough to sound it. And Rickon, whose life had been a song of near-deaths and salvaged dawns, knew that someday a choice would come: to break the horn, risking the gate forever sealed, or to keep it, trusting wolves to guard its power beyond the edge of night. Until that hour, he guarded the north as any Stark should, with claw, with mercy, and with a howl that promised no darkness would ever find its prey unguarded again. And the free folk howled with him, filling the long night with chorus, until even the aurora seemed to shape itself into the leaping form of a black direwolf, emblem not only of House Stark but of a North reborn in unity, sharper than winter and loftier than legend. The spring that followed the savage winter of flame and shadow felt almost gentle, though the snows receded only by grudging inches and every thawing drift revealed the bones of some battle. Rickon Stark awoke most dawns within a tent of tightly sewn elk hide pitched in a meadow north of Winterfell, close enough that the castle's gray towers loomed above the mist like weather-worn cliff faces, yet far enough that birdsong, not blacksmith hammers, greeted his ears. He shared those dawns with no counselors, no squires, often not even with midnight. The dire wolf preferred to patrol the perimeter of the encampment, a pale-eyed wraith among the paling shadows. Rickon would rise, shrug on a brigandine jacket stitched from shaggy sealskin, and walk the half-frozen stream that bordered the meadow, thinking of what it meant to be a king with neither crown nor seat. Southron envoys had begun calling him that, King Wolf, Iceborn King, the Winterpack's boy monarch, but the free folk still spoke of him as clan brother, while northern smallfolk favored the runty Stark come back robbing death of a meal. Jon's lords, uneasy at best, skirted outright rebellion, but each lord's sworn brothers whispered that Rickon held more blades than their liege and more fervor than any shrine. Titles, he had learned, were like frost. They clung until the sun of fortune melted them, leaving only cold water and memory. What mattered was the pack. The pack lived in transit, furs, tents, a rolling city of sleds, between Freehold's rising palisades and Winterfell's storied walls. The mixture delighted storytellers and confounded scribes. Some days the free folk bartered seal oil and walrus ivory for cobbled iron nails from White Harbor. Others found northern tanners studying whalebone fishing hooks or watching spearwives demonstrate how to stretch a single hide into a 4-man windbreak. Trade gave way to kinship, and kinship slowly to custom. A new thing, neither free folk nor lordly, but something of both, a snowbird hatched in an age of wolves. Rickon tasted that newness each time the watch of the wolf changed its patrol sigils. They painted pine shields half white, half black, the division crooked rather than clean, as though to declare no clear line lay between what had been and what must be. On the black they daubed a bleached dire wolf. On the white, the bearpaw rune of the then. He liked the discordant symmetry. It spoke to him of possibility. Yet possibility bred unease. In the long hall Winterfell's masons had repaired after Valice's attack, Lord Dustin stirred a cup of ale with his dagger point and spoke to Jon. "The pack is well until the next famine. Wait till grain runs thin and wolf brats outnumber our calves. Then those spearwives'll come south, and you'll regret giving them steel." Jon asked if Dustin regretted the free folk axes at the fangs of Skagos. Dustin glowered and muttered into his ale, but his words scattered through the court like barley before geese. Rickon caught them on the wind as surely as if they had been screamed. He answered, not by council edict but by road. Within a fortnight 600 free folk, lordsmen, and newly sworn knights watch-turned-patrol carpenters hacked a scar through the wolfswood toward Freehold, felling pine and maple in a straight line wide enough for 2 wagons abreast. They bridged streams with paired mammoth ribs banded in iron. They sank stone-mile markers, each overseen by a giant kinmason whose hammer could crack granite like walnut. Northern lords scoffed. Roads were for the Reach, not the wild north. But when merchant trains rolled from Moat Cailin to Freehold in half the usual days, coffers fattened and scoffing softened to grudging nods. Rickon walked the first finished league with Runa at his side and Midnight pacing like a shadow. Runa rapped the planks, listening to the note of their joinery. "Smooth as a summer sea," she said, approving despite herself. "Won't break an elk's ankle or a lordling's wagon wheel." Rickon looked up at pine boughs dripping meltwater. "Let them call me king if they must. I only want to be builder of bridges." "Bridges get crossed both ways," she warned. He nodded. "I count on it." The first sign of deeper trouble came not from murmurs within Winterfell, but from a raven that arrived ragged and half-starved. Messenger tube splintered, parchment loose in its talons rather than secured. The bird clawed Rickon's forearm before he calmed it, then slumped, exhausted, on his wrist. He cooed stark soft words Bran had once used on birds and cradled the creature while Runa slid the parchment free. A breach beneath the dusk spear. Those 7 words only.
No seal, no signature.
Yet both knew the reference. The dusk spear was what free folk called the easternmost shadow of the wall's ruins, an overturned tower whose jagged stump bled sunset glow across the last river valley. Long collapsed, it nonetheless marked a portion of tunnels Benjen Stark had once spoken of, passages smugglers and deserters had used when the wall still stood proud. Rickon's jaw tightened. He remembered Benjen's stories, how some tunnels were large enough for a mammoth, others twisting rabbit runs that came out leagues away. Most were blocked by rubble from the wall's fall, but if one remained open and breached, there was no telling who or what used it. Jon prepared a sortie of 50 knights and 100 watch of the Wolf Scouts. Rickon insisted on joining. Sansa protested. Freehold needed his voice to pacify traders during the spring market. He kissed her cheek and said Freehold would stand a week without him if its stones were laid with the right oaths. They rode out before dawn. Fog lay heavy, muff. Fling hooves, though Midnight loped ahead with Phalon, Runa's half-tamed snowbear, sniffing for unnatural scents. The further east they rode, the more the fog stank of sulfur. By the time they reached the dusk spear, even the horses nickered unease. The ruin itself looked unchanged. A stub of ice mortar wall hunched over Scree, its shadow thin under a sun that never warmed. But the ground before it was torn, clawed, as though some vast Talone thing had dragged itself out of the earth. Obsidian shards littered the churned mud, some as long as daggers yet melted at their tips. A heat blast? No hearth burned so hot in these lands. Jon crouched at a shard. Dragon fire? Rickon shook his head, vision crawling with memory of Valice's black conflagration. If a dragon had flown, ravens would have screamed from Skagos to White Harbor. Something else. He knelt, brushed away moist soil. Under the top layer, the earth was blood damp, but the blood was neither human nor beast. It shimmered faintly, oily, catching light in blue pinpricks. Runa muttered an oath. Warlock blood, or the blood of what they call. They followed the trail of claw furrows into a tunnel yawning beneath the ruined tower. Black dust rimmed its mouth. Dragonglass ground fine as flour. The scouts drew torches dipped in whale oil. Flames spat greenish. John gestured. 2 columns, Rickon and Runa center. The tunnel sloped steeply. Frost feathers rimed its ceiling like brittle cathedral arches. Twice they passed alcoves filled with bones arranged in spirals. White remains deliberately set, as if in sacrifice. The oily blood marked the floor, dripped along walls, vanishing at points only to reappear further in, fresher each time. Whatever bled had retreated deeper. At what felt like a mile, the passage widened into a hall carved by ancient hands or claws. Obelisks of ice lined its length, each crowned by black candles whose flames burned bright blue without melting the wax. In the chamber's center crouched a shape half man, half spider, hunched over something that pulsed faint silver. The creature's back rose and fell like a bellows. Its limbs ended in hooked talons. Runa's teeth clicked. John raised a gloved fist. The column halted. Rickon stepped forward alone, Valyrian shortsword sheathed. "Who bleeds in the halls of those long dead?" he called. The creature straightened with fluid grace. It turned a head too broad for human shoulders, eyes lidless, black around pupils burning blue. Its face was pale, stretched skin, lips sewn shut in a grid of wire, but words formed in the air, disembodied, vibrating in bone. Horn bearer. Rickon felt the tug of buried chains under the weirwood, an echo of his own heartbeat. Midnight growled behind him. He steadied the wolf silently. "I keep the horn safe," he said. "You keep your life if you retreat and never return." Armored eyelids blinked sideways. Horn must sound. Gate must open. Night, not dead, but dreaming. John surged forward, long claw out. The creature raised a talon and flame from the obelisk nearest flared white. Half the scouts stumbled, blinded. The talon parted its own stitched mouth. Wire snapped, flesh split, and a column of blue frost fog poured from its throat. Whites began clawing up from the earth, drawn to the breath. Runa's spear flashed, impaling the spider thing through the torso. It screamed, not sound but pure pressure, ramming minds. Knights fell to knees clutching ears though no noise touched air. Rickon felt his scar burn like a brand. He drew his short sword and cleaved the creature's spear-impaled form clean from shoulder to hip. Frost blood spattered, evaporated in hissing vapor. Where the blood landed, whites faltered, limbs stuttering. John bellowed the command, "Dragonglass!" and obsidian daggers flew. The chamber erupted in a storm of black glass and shattering bone. When silence again dared show its face, only Rickon, John, Runa, and 6 knights remained standing. The silver pulsing object lay in the creature's spidery grip even after death. Rickon pried it free, a smooth orb of pale quartz, so cold it scorched. Inside its heart something moved, swirling like storm cloud. He wrapped it in sealskin, pocketed it. They burned what remained of the spider thing with lamp oil. Blue flames spat but did not spread. John collapsed the tunnel mouth with kegs of river powder Sansa had imported from Lannisport, sealing the hall in a thunderous roar that rattled teeth. Dust billowed behind them all the long way back. Back at Winterfell, Maester Rickon, brought north from Old Town after the Maester's conclave admitted southern lore of shadowbinding was scarce, took the quartz orb, examined it beneath Ruby's ground into lenses. He recoiled. "It is a heart of a god," he whispered, eyes filmed with terror. "Or what some call a god's heart. The Ashai believe such stones hold the last breath of a dead star, each breath a thought seeking flesh." Rickon folded arms. "If so, this thought was seeking mine." It spoke horn bearer. Rickon's hands shook. "Shatter it. Grind it to dust. Dust can swirl upon wind. No, we will bind it in runes." He summoned runesmiths, dwarfish men who claimed descent from the first smith who forged ice spears for the children. They etched the quartz in labyrinth spirals, filled grooves with dragonglass powder mixed with Rickon's blood, sealed seams in lead from the mines at the wall's foot. Then they placed the orb in a box of weirwood slats bound by 3 iron-lock bars, each bar keyed different. One key hung on John's neck, one on Runa's, the last on Rickon's own chain. The box they sunk into a cistern lined in obsidian and salted water beneath the god's wood, far from the horn's crypt yet within raven flight for warning. John watched the last lead seal cool, eyes grim. We bury curses, but curses crawl upward. Better if dragons yet lived. Rickon met his brother's sorrow with a wan smile. Then we shall be dragons enough. That summer freehold hosted the North's first triune assembly. From the east, skiffs bore hard-home root farmers. From the south, wagons brought baroton merchants. From the west, whale-fat barges arrived laden with Myrish-dyed linens. They gathered in a half-finished amphitheater at Freehold's center, stone benches ascending like gray petals around a speaking dais of blackwood. Rickon ascended the dais with Sansa on his right and a scar-cheeked trader named Mira Longseeks, elected by free folk clans, as left. Above them, a canopy of elk hides kept sun off brows, though warm breeze teased braids and banners. Rickon spoke first, of roads and patrols, of Spider-Thing and God's Hard. He spoke honestly, sparing none the dread, yet also spoke of how the unity of blade and will had crushed the threat. Then Sansa spoke of trade laws, tariffs light enough to invite prosperity but stern enough to prevent ruinous undercutting. Mira addressed hunting quotas. Migrating herds once slaughtered wholesale now needed time to replenish. Arguments blazed. Manderly men complaining free folk nets swept too much cod. Free folk complaining northern grazing rights stole their mammoth routes. Voices rose, fists beat tables, but none drew steel. At assembly's end, 6 accords signed by rune and seal were passed. Not perfect, but working, living. Rickon stepped down amid murmured praise. Runa intercepted, face clouded. A watch scout had returned. 3 free folk hamlets razed north of Skagos by raiders with no banner. Survivors claimed attackers bore bronze masks and whispered of pyrestone daggers that ignited flesh. The Lysa's remnants. Rickon's spine chilled. He dispatched 40 riders that hour under the command of Thea of the Bear People, with orders: track, harry, leave none alive for revenge. But in his heart he knew ghosts rarely die. Ghosts of his own surfaced nightly. Dreams of the Battle of the Bastards still returned in fragments. Arrow hiss, Ramsay's grin, the shock of bolt grazing rib. Yet another dream had begun threading through, standing in crypt darkness before the chained horn, a low thrumming like a distant drum calling his name. Rickon, Rickon. Sometimes Shaggy Dog padded from shadows, fur black as moonless night, and nudged him toward the horn. Other times Bran, cloaked in the weirwood's root and raven, folded wings and whispered, "Not yet, brother." He woke uncertain whom to trust, the wolf of instinct or the raven of reason. One such night he rose, left tent for the meadow's edge where fireflies drifted like embers from unseen hearth. Midnight followed, silent save the whisper of pads on grass. The moon hung half-slain behind ragged cirrus. He knelt, fingers combing dew-wet moss. Footfalls approached. John, cloaked in fur and sleepless worry. Rickon did not turn. "Do you feel him?" he asked. "Rob? Father?" John crouched beside. Sometimes in steel against steel, or in a council's hush. Rickon brushed dew from fingertips. "I feel Shaggy Dog. He pulls at leash of memory. I think he wants me to sound the horn. But Bran's thought, if it is Bran, says not yet. How do I weigh their voices?" John stared at crickets flitting in moonsilver. "A king weighs by need," he said at last. "Need of his people. If one voice brims with your fear, and one with your hope, choose the one free of selfish want." Rickon studied his brother, seeing snow in hair that once was raven black. He realized John carried burdens he never spoke. A queen's death overseas, broken vows to Night's Watch, a crown of compromise. Yet John still chose hope. Rickon exhaled. When I stand before the horn, I will listen first to the land. If the land is ready for its gate to open, I will know. John clasped his shoulder. The land speaks in silence. Come dawn, hear with open heart. The raid parties returned a month later, bearing grim trophies. Bronze masks splashed crimson, pyrestone daggers dulled by ash, and one living prisoner, a gaunt woman whose wrists had been flensed of skin where fiery shackles once bit. She named herself Serafini of the Last Kiss, formerly acolyte to Valisa. Under starve-point interrogation by Mira and Lord Manderley, she confessed. Valisa had possessed followers more fanatic than even she believed. Upon her fall at Winterfell, 6 covens splintered, each vowing to recover Horn and God's Hard. They believed Rickon's line blasphemy, wolf blood tainting the song of fire and ice. Serafini's raiders sought relics rumored buried in First Men barrows, shards of dragonglass once swallowed by children pledged to Shadowflame. They hoped to forge these with Valyrian metallurgies into keys to break Rickon's wardings. Serafini offered something else, knowledge of a greater threat, an artifact deeper north than any free folk dare roam. The Night Seed, a coal-black root pulsing cold that fed on grave soil until it could birth dark weir, twisted mockeries of heart trees. One such tree, legend claimed, had sprouted on a glacier far beyond the mapped world. Valisa's true plan, Serafini insisted, had been to water the Nightseed sprout with the horn's power, letting Shadowfire bleed through all living weirwoods, poisoning the green site, letting her speak to every eye carved in bark. Jon and Sansa doubted. Runa believed. Free folk remembered tales of rot trees whispered from runestone hearths. Rickon watched Serafini's hollow gaze and sensed no deceit. Her fear was too raw. They could not all ride north. Crops demanded sowing, trade demanded guard. So Rickon assembled a lean vanguard. Runa, Mira, Thea Bear People, 10 giant kin, 20 watch scouts, and a handful of northern rangers led by Jory Slatemouth of the Flint Cliffs. He did not ask Jon to come. The North needed its crowned King Wolf in Winterfell. Jon understood and pressed Longclaw into Rickon's hands, though Rickon already bore his short sword. 2 blades for 2 brothers, Jon said. They set off on midsummer's morn, chasing the last dyes of dawn. Snow still clung to high ridges, though rivers swelled with meltwater. The land above the shivering sea was a maze of fjords and ice cliffs. Beyond even Skagos, maps turned to yawning white. At White Knife's headwaters they built hide canoes, for horses would not drink the brine taste winning downstream. They paddled through channels riddled with floating ice that chimed like bells when bumped. Giants rowed with oars carved from spruce trunks. Midnight stood on prow, nose twitching. On the 6th day they found a shore of black sand where snow thawed not at all. Spires of obsidian rose like dragon teeth. Within their hollows trees grew, pale, leafless, bark smooth as bone. These bore no red leaves. Instead their knots leaked icer that steamed in sun. The free folk fell silent. Runa murmured, "Nightseed's children." They landed warily. The sand clung, gritty, coating boots. Tracks marked the shore. Bipedal prints narrow and long, claws etching arcs. Jory knelt, examining. "Not white," he said. "Weights too balanced. Something alive." The mist thickened inland, carrying faint chords, like music warped by distance. Mira hissed. That tune was a death call in raider myth. Rickon raised one fist. They advanced by twos, spears ready. Midnight ranged. Phalon lumbered, sniffing. The first corpse hung from a white tree, suspended by tendons of its own back muscles. Ribcage flared open like wings. The body was human, face obscured by a bronze mask. Runes cut across chest spelled gift to night. Below, the sand was sodden with blood so fresh it clotted. Something in the tree roots pulsed, absorbing. Rickon's stomach clenched. He ordered torches lit from whale oil canisters. They doused the tree in flame. It hissed but did not burn, sap bubbling black and tarry. Smoke rose with a smell like meat left too long in sun. Further on the music grew. They crested a dune into a clearing where 10 bone-pale trees circled a pit. A choir of masked cultists kneeled, chanting in guttural Valyrian. At pit's edge stood a figure in robes of moth-eaten silver. Serafini's master? No, this one taller, antlered horns jutting from mask. Beside him rested a bundle Rickon recognized. The spider creature's severed torso, carried here and bound with black rope that bled frost fumes. Runa launched her spear before thought. It whistled true, piercing the antlered figure's chest. Chants broke into cacophony. Cultists scrambled, some raised pyrestone blades sputtering green. Rickon charged, Longclaw high, watch scouts following with obsidian hatchets. Battle there was unlike others. When Longclaw cut cloth, the cloth bled whispering smoke that slithered away. When giants crushed heads, the bodies emptied of bone, leaving sackskins twitching. And when a pyrestone dagger nicked Rickon's shoulder, fire raced the cut, searing until he pressed snow to quench. In the melee, the antlered figure seized the spider torso, hauling it toward the pit. Rickon sprinted, vaulted a dying cultist, and slammed into him. They toppled onto pit's rim. Below, a root-coiled night seed, thick as oak trunk, glowing with inner frost, pulsed like a serpent's throat. The antlered mask cracked. Beneath, a face gray and hideously young, eyes black, mouth stitched. It screamed voiceless rage and clutched Rickon's throat. Midnight leapt, fangs tearing into the figure's shoulder. Together Wolf and King toppled him into the pit. As he fell, he dragged Rickon by cloak, ripping clasp. Rickon slid inches before Mira grabbed his arm, Thea bracing behind. The figure struck the root. Frost erupted, engulfing spider torso and man alike. The root flared silver, then burst, ejecting shards of ice shrieking through air. One shard speared a cultist. The rest embedded trees, splitting bark. A roar shook the clearing, deeper than mountain thunder. The night seed convulsed, cracks spiderwebbed along its length, oozing black and blue fluid. Trees tilted, their pallid leaves withering into ash. Cultists fled, screaming as frost overtook them, flash-freezing skin. Rickon scrambled back, ordered retreat. They dashed for shore as the ground heaved. Fissures opened, venting vapor. Waves pounded sand, drawn by unseen tide. At canoes they jumped. Giants heaved vessels into surf amid hail of ice pebbles. They paddled until arms burned, not daring look back until open sea lay behind. When they turned, the black sand coast was gone. Where it had been rose an iceberg shaped like a fong, steaming under sun. The pallid trees were sealed within ghostly silhouettes. Runa exhaled. Night seed wounded, if not slain. Rickon touched shoulder cut, wincing at seared flesh. Or sleeping deeper, but its priests are scattered. Mira nodded toward the smoking fong. Some evils can't be killed, only starved. Let the sea be its dungeon. Rickon gazed northward beyond horizon. He sensed the horn's chain humming approval, silent yet vibrating faint trust. For now fate allowed the gate remain closed. The return journey tested them. Storms with sleet knives, whale pods that circled canoes curious and hungry. Once an iceberg calving near crushed them. But home they came, and Freehold's unfinished watchtower hoisted blue banners in salute. Winterfell's bells told a blessing, and Sansa met them at the new road's head with warm bread and tears unhidden. Rickon refused a hero's feast. He walked straight to the Godswood crypt, down past Chained Horn, past God's Hard Cistern, to the lowest root chamber where an ancient pool mirrored the heart tree's blood-red leaves. He knelt, washing nightseed ash from palms. Water chilled bone but eased the fire of Pyrestone wound. Within mirror surface, he saw a reflection not solely his. Shaggy Dog's golden eye and Bran's raven wing overlapped his features. He listened and heard only heartbeats. His, the land's, the pack's. A symphony that for the moment played in harmony. He whispered, "Not yet," and the horn's echo hushed. Autumn set gold on Freehold's first wheat crop. Children chased direwolf pups between sheaves. The Triune Assembly ratified road expansion west to the Rills. Northern lords grumbled less, profit smoothing pride. Jon visited Ironrath, forging alliances with House Forrester for timber quotas that spared weirwoods. Serafini, kept in iron, earned partial pardon by teaching maesters how to quench Pyrestone's curse with powdered dragonglass and seawater vinegar. In time she accepted a place among the Watch of the Wolf, her burned wrists bound not by chains but an oath inked in weirwood sap. Yet stories spread south of a new claimant in Old Valyria, a coal-eyed war prince wielding blade of smoking basalt, naming Rickon Ice Tyrant. Across the sea spymasters whispered that the war prince sought ships and sail captains reckless enough to brave shivering straits. Rickon learned this from John over a hearthfire. He laughed, not mirthful. So the great game begins again. John's gaze mirrored flames. Are we ready? Rickon leaned back, feeling weight of road dust and root ash and unborn hell. A pack ready is never certain. We sharpen teeth, watch horizons, and trust snow to tell us when to run. He tapped John's mug in toast. And until then, we build. Outside, Freehold's watchtower bells chimed shift change. A dawn wind carried scents of pine and distant sea and ovens baking barley bread. Rickon tasted all, breathed deep, and felt hope. Not bright, not naive, but weather-worn as old Nan's quilt. Patched, frayed, and stubbornly warm. The night would come again. Horns might sound, gates might break, shadows might twist into new shapes. But wolves had learned to ing louder than wind, and when they sang together, even gods listened. He raised his mug to the window where stars shivered over the wolfswood. To the pack, he murmured, and in the dark beyond the glass midnight howled. A low, rolling note that joined distant answering howls until it seemed the very bones of the north hummed along, promising that as long as wolves roamed under aurora-veiled skies, no darkness would go unchallenged and no child of Winterfell would ever stand alone again. Autumn bled into early winter with scarcely a warning. 1 week Freehold's wheat still stood gold beneath low-slung clouds. The next, a skein of sleet stitched its own hard rind across every field, sealing seed and soil in white silence. Rickon felt the shift keenly. The air had a thrum that set old scars itching, as if the land itself listened for distant hoofbeats. Word of the Valyrian war prince, Menor Corel, son of no lineage the citadel could name, arrived first by raven, then by smuggler, then by the uneasy hush of markets where once there had been laughter. Ships from the narrow sea brought stories of his black galleys raiding the sisters. Villages put to the torch, their stone docks left knuckled and skeletal, priests nailed upside down in the surf for gulls to pick. Always the same banner flew from his mast-tops. A dragon's skull painted crimson, jaws cracked wide, a horn where the tongue should be. At the Triune Council fire Rickon spread the latest scrap of sailcloth, torn from one such mast, across a table of fresh-sawn spruce. The cloth stank of tar and spilt pitch. The sigil's eyes had been carved open so the night beyond could leer through. Mira Longseeks shivered, though fire cracked nearby. That skull's no Valyrian glyph, she muttered, tracing the horn tongue with a bone-handled knife. It's an omen from the Shadowlands. Menor is feeding 2 legends, Dragonfire and Shadowflame. He aims to rule whatever rises when you let the 2 mate. John glanced from Mira to Rickon. Our levees are green. The new road brings grain, aye, but not enough steel. The Mandalese can fit out perhaps 20 longships. The Umbers, 5. Valyrian blackships number thrice that, and every hull rumored to carry wyvern hatchlings chained in the hold. Sailors' tails fatten like walrus, Runa said, but her tone lacked certainty. She had seen Pyrestone wounds cauterize before flesh parted. Wyvern flame was credible enough. Rickon stood silent until their voices faded, then set a smooth pebble on the cloth, covering the skull's left eye. We greet Corel far from our shores, he said. Meet him on water where his dragons cannot perch, under skies where an aurora answers only wolves. The giant kin know how to fell icebergs into waves as tall as Winterfell's walls. A black ship heals like any other before enough water. A murmur stirred. Giants and free folk raiders exchanged grins. A battle fought by sea and ice appealed to them. Northern lords less so. Many had never sailed beyond White Knife's mouth. Yet fear of black dragons overcame fear of cold seas. Preparations began. Throughout November, Freehold's nascent shipyards rang night and day. Giants hauled whole spruce trunks, splitting them with hammers the weight of oxen, while free folk children scampered beneath, gathering splinters for fire kindling. Shipwrights from Sisterton, driven from burning docks, lent their craft. Myrish refugees offered pitch concoctions that shed seawater like oiled hide. Rickon walked among half-finished hulls each dawn, running calloused fingers along freshly bent ribs, listening for faults. Midnight trotted at his heel, occasionally raising head to sniff the salt wind blowing up from the White Knife estuary. Evenings he shared simple meals, salt pork, leek broth, hard bread, with laborers, refusing the high table reserved for him. "Boards know no crowns," he'd say, gnawing meat beside a sooty boy who had never seen a lord, let alone eaten with one. Word of those suppers spread quicker than pitch fires. By month's end every hammer beat carried a cadence. Ice wolf, as if the ships themselves chanted. Meanwhile, the watch of the wolf doubled scouting runs along northern fjords. Skiffs slipped past Skagos by moonlight, hugging cliffs where leviathans sometimes broke the surface, exhaling steam plumes. One patrol never returned, only charred planks bobbing ashore days later. Runa personally led the next sortie. They found half a black ship gutted on rocks, its mast splintered but sails intact. Crimson dragon skull preying on a horn. No crew, living or dead. Only a smear of black sand upon the deck and claw marks melted into iron fittings. She reported to Rickon in the pre-dawn gloom of a snow-dusted barack. "Wyvern signs?" he asked. "None. But something burned," she answered, handing him a jagged shard of dark glass dredged from bilge. "Not dragon glass. Something else." Rickon turned the shard. It shimmered faint green, veins pulsing like breath. He felt the god's hard box hum in its cistern far below. The gods would dull, cautious, as if some distant kinship pricked. He ordered the shard locked with it, triple barred. That night the dream returned. Shaggy dog pacing before chained horn. Bran's raven perched upon horn's mouth. Far behind, something huge breathing slow frost into a dark beyond dark. "Not yet," the raven whispered, wings ash-white. Shaggy dog snarled, tail restless. Rickon woke with snowflakes on his blanket, though the tent flap was closed. Early December brought the Frostfall Fair. Once merely a wintertown tradition, now relocated to freehold so northerner and freefolk might haggle side by side. Stalls of sealskin boots abutted tables laden with carholed silver goblets. Braided mammoth sinew reins hung near casks of arbor red traded by daring captains. Jugglers from Pentos performed among giant children clapping thunder. Harpists played a melancholy tune that tasted of pine smoke and yearning. Rickon walked incognito in a hooded cloak of drab wool, Sansa on his arm. They sampled fried eel cakes dusted with ground juniper, drizzled with honey thick as sap. Voices behind them debated alliances in 6 languages. A bare shirt then recited dirty limericks to a blushing northern maid. For a brief breath, the north felt cosmopolitan. Then a scream knifed the air. Rickon pivoted, hand to hilt, as a cloth-draped cart toppled near the central well. From beneath the tarp rolled a sphere of glass the size of a child's head, quartz laced with blue light, another god's hard. Folk scattered, some gawped frozen. The orb cracked upon cobbles, emitting a tone like a bell struck underwater. A pulse of frost raced outward. Stones whitened, lantern flames guttered. Rickon lunged, wrapping cloak around the orb before it shattered outright. Frost scorched his gloves, weaving ice up his arms. Midnight sprang, pushing Sansa clear. Runa and Mira converged. Each seized a fold of wool, helping Rickon cradle the shard. Together they forced it into a lead-lined chest, one stall used for pickled lamprey. Mira slammed the lid. Runa hammered home a meat skewer as makeshift pin. The chest rattled once, foam hissing through seams, then fell inert. Guards ringed the plaza. Healers rubbed snowmelt across Rickon's blackened gloves, skin beneath blistered but intact. In the aftermath, they found a body pinned beneath the cart. A Sisterton smuggler known to barter salt fish for coin. His throat neatly slit, pockets empty but for a scrap of sailcloth bearing the dragon's skull and horn. John convened emergency council. Serafini, sworn though still watched, identified the orb. Murmur seed, cousin to the god's heart, grown in shadow flame pits. When shattered, it whispered madness into any weirwood within 10 leagues, planting doubt or rage. If the seed had burst beside Freehold's half-planted weirwood grove, meant to be the assembly's sacred park, nightmares might have poisoned hundreds. Men are Hollow's folk before the arrow leaves the bough, Serafini warned. Your walls will matter less if your trees betray you. Rickon ordered every sapling warded with dragonglass rings. He dispatched watch pairs, one free folk, one Northman, armed with copper bells whose tone countered shadow flame pulses. Serafini supplied the key. Each night the bells chimed softly, a lullaby of vigilance. He also tripled patrols along the coast, though storms grew savage. Ice pack choked harbors, snapping hulls if moored too long. Black ships could ride such seas better than most, their hulls copper-sheathed, rumored heated from within by braziers stoked with smoky coals. Wolves would have to meet dragons amid gale and ice. By midwinter the fleet, 50 stout Nars, 12 deep-bellied giants' galleys, and 20 Northmen longships, slid into the shivering strait. Their prows bore carved direwolves, maw open, iron fangs painted with whale oil pitch. Giants manned great sweeps. Free folk archers knocked barbed harpoons tipped with dragonglass. Northmen handled steering oars, cheeks reddened by cold, hearts steeled by coin and cause. Rickon's flagship, Shaggy Dog's Howl, boasted twin masts rigged with sealskin sails able to reef and fan quick as a gull's wings. Runa captained Icebreaker, a broad-beamed vessel armed with a bow-mounted trebuchet designed to hurl ice boulders sealed in tar. Mira commanded a sleek raider of Sisterton make, her crew half women, half men, every or painted spiral red and black. They sailed a zigzag, hugging berg clusters where currents eddied. Giants used massive saws to notch weak spots. A heave from 10 of them might flip a chunk of icehouse into swells just as enemy hulls approached. For 3 days they saw only gulls and gray water. On the 4th, lookouts spied black sails etched against sunrise, 11 galleys in arrowhead formation, oars rising and falling in perfect cadence. Each prow ended in a dragon's skull of black iron, eyes glinting emerald from within, wildfire lanterns. Smoke plumed from vents along decks. Wyvern cages, or braziers, no telling until too near. Rickon ordered half sail. The fleet angled behind a ridge of berg reef. While crews waited in icy hush, giant kin clambered onto bergs, axes hacking final seams. Harpoon crews coated tips in resin. Torchmen stood ready. The black galleys advanced, unaware. Their drumbeats carried across the water, deep, relentless. Rickon imagined Coral on his flagship, lips curved, expecting terrified Northmen to flee. He signaled. Trebuchet arms creaked. Ice-sealed tar bombs arced, shattering midair into slush that rained sticky pitch onto the forward galley. Almost at once torch arrows followed. Pitch ignited, blossoming orange against winter light. Giants roared, shoving the first berg. It slid, tilting, then thundered into waves. A wall of water surged, lifting the burning galley, then slamming it sideways into its line mate. Masts snapped, sails tangled, men shrieked, but the remaining 9 ships wheeled with uncanny precision, oars flaring like black wings. From their decks ballistae fired iron javelins trailing chains. Each chain ended in a flailing wyvern, wings pinned, tails lit with clay pots. At mid-flight the pots burst. Green fire fanned, and the beast howled lava. The chained creatures crashed amid Rickon's formation, thrashing burning arcs. One wyvern smashed onto Myra's deck, tail spraying wildfire. Her crew doused with seawater barrels, then hacked the beast's neck while it snapped. Runa's icebreaker took a direct hit to steering board, rudder engulfed. She grabbed axe, cleaved the burning chain, shoved flaming wyvern carcass overboard. Rickon realized the wyverns were living firebombs, expendables, clever, brutal. He barked new orders. Cut free any chain before pot burst. Douse decks. Harpoon teams, once finished, sniped the wyvern handlers. Arbalests launched obsidian bolts that bored through bronze helms. Another berg toppled. Another black ship foundered. Yet one slipped the kill zone, rowing hard straight for Shaggy Dog's hell. Its prow scull opened jaws. A horn of black metal slid forward, mounted on a gimbal, pointing like a siege ram. Rickon felt the horn in the crypt howl back, a deep tremor in his marrow. He knew what would come. A blast tuned to snap chains, sunder bindings. If it sounded at sea, perhaps the impact would travel water, bypassing wards. Menor had forged a counterfeit gate horn. He leapt down to steering deck. Archers, aim for the horn. Arrows peppered the black galley's prow, but iron plates deflected. The galley drew abreast, oars shipped. Rowers ducked under benches. A hooded figure stepped to bow platform, tall, armored in scaled leather lacquered obsidian. Menor? The figure raised conch-twisted horn. Rickon sprinted, vaulted rail, landing on a rocking berg chunk still afloat. Midnight followed, claws skittering. With 3 strides, he jumped to the enemy prow, sword flashing. The horn-bearer turned. Eyes behind mask glowed veinous blue. Not Menor but Warlock, perhaps bound to coral. Oppressed lips, stitched but parting to horn mouth. Rickon struck, blade ringing off iron. Sparks sprayed. He stabbed again, but Warlock twisted, robes billowing smoke that smelled like burnt pine sap. Midnight lunged, teeth at calf. Warlock kicked, boot cracking Wolf's jaw. Rickon roared, slashed, and took the Warlock's hand off at wrist. The severed appendage flopped, horn clattering to deck. In fury, the creature hissed frost, breath icing planks. Rickon drove long claw under its sternum. Steel burst through spine. Warlock sagged, whispering one word, "Awaken." A pulse rippled from corpse, snaking through spilled blood into the horn. The metal shuddered, lines of blue fire veining it. Rickon seized the horn before energy built, hurled it overboard. It splashed. Ice bloomed instantly around. Midnight, limping, whined. Rickon scooped Wolf under arm, leapt back to berg as enemy deck erupted. Fire meeting frost in violent storm that split hull. The galley sank bow first. Across the straight chaos reigned but tipping. Runa's trebuchet lobbed berg chunks now spiked with harpoons trailing chain nets. When a chunk struck a black ship, giants hauled nets tight, dragging vessel against jagged ice ramparts, scraping belly open. Out of 11 enemy ships, 4 burned, 3 sinking, 2 limp steering. The last, center flagship of Menor, retreated, sails unfurling black on black. Rickon forced his damaged crew to hold, not chase. Victory cost 9 northern hulls, 2 giant galleys, dozens dead. Sea hissed with burning pitch, but Valyrian power bled. They limped into Freehold Harbor midwinter solstice, battered but loud with survivor song. Fires flickered along new quays, warding frost. Healers carried wounded ashore. Giant kin wept over lost kin whose bodies sank, promising to carve gravestones of iceberg stone. Rickon supervised salvage, cherishing timbers, lines, sails for fixes. Every resource mattered, war not done. John met him on dock, clasping blood-stiff gloves. "Well fought." Warlock's horn nearly sang. Rickon answered, voice hoarse. He described battle. John listened, frowned deep as Melisandre's ruby lake. "If Coral forged one, he will forge more." "We answer with truth," Rickon said. "Show North his lies." He summoned scribes to pen accounts, tales of chained wyvern bombs, of false horns backfire. Copies dispatched via Raven to White Harbor, Old Town, King's Landing, even Bravos where sell-sail companies weighed contracts. Let the world doubt the Dragonskull banner. Despite victory, gloom lingered. The gods' hard box rattled knights, agitation rising. The new shard rattled answer. Maester Rickon proposed submerging both deeper, building lead sarcophagus. Workers dug beneath cistern, embedding vault amid bedrock, inscribing runes older than runestones of the Vale. Still, some nights, frost traced crypt walls and spirals. End-of-year feast convened in Winterfell's rebuilt Great Hall. Snow had fused every tower into one vast white beast gleaming under full moon. Inside, torches guttered low to conserve pitch. Lords wore heavy cloaks. Free folk chiefs donned bare fur mantles. John sat high seat, Rickon at his right. When cups brimmed with hot wine, John rose, spoke of battles won, of hearts united. Rickon followed, voice quiet at first, then gaining. We stood upon ice and fire. Fire sought to drown us, ice sought to break us. Yet you, pack giant, farmer, spearwife, lord, held line. Coral sees only skulls and horns. He misunderstands the song. Not fire, not ice. Both together make new spring. We will hold until spring. Cheer rolled. Music rose. But Sansa watching saw fatigue rim Rickon's eyes, skin drawn. Later she found him in crypt, hand on chains of horn. She asked what weighed him. Bran's raven says not yet, he whispered. But Shaggy Dog paces. Every counterfeit horn forged, every god's heart awakened, weakens the gate. If Coral sounds his false horn in the south, echoes might still crack the wards here. Sansa laid hand on his. You speak of raven and wolf as if of brothers. They are, but you are flesh. Rest. Others can guard a while. Rickon nodded, but sleep fled him still. Late January brought a blizzard of preternatural fury. Snowbanks swallowed freehold's first-floor windows. Wolves hunted by scent alone. Wind keened like weirwoods in grief. Amid this white roar, a single figure trudged up Winterfell's King's Road. Ragged cloak, mask of stitched hide. Guards hailed, spears lowered. The figure collapsed, clutching parcel. When unmasked within gatehouse, he proved Outland Summerisles born. Lips cracked blue. He gasped a message. Coral abandoned black shipwrecks, marched by land. His warlocks herded wyverns fitted with iron shoes so claws would not sink snow. Worse, he carried a new horn, larger, cast from boiled god shards, the Void Speaker. They planned to sound it at Dawnspire Barrow, an ancient barrow mound still alive with First Men runes, a place where Earth's bones were thin. Dawnspire lay a week's march south of Winterfell, beyond the knotted barrows where no plow touched. Rickon convened war council. If Void Speaker sounded there, near living weirwood root networks, shockwaves might bypass Rickon's northern wards, tearing chain anyway. They had to intercept. Within hours, Wolfwatch riders mounted lean elk, racing to raise free folk clans winter-camped in haunted mountain foothills. Northern lords mustered retainers, giants strapped on bark-laminated shields. Jon insisted on leading center. Rickon would command vanguard of free folk raiders, moving swift through wolfswood trails only they knew. Sansa pressed a dagger into Rickon's palm. Valyrian steel, once Eddard Stark's kitchen knife, forgotten after he marched south. Remember, she whispered, wolves have sisters too. He tucked blade at belt beside Longclaw. 3 days toward Dawnspire, the army trudged through knee-deep drifts. Sky cleared only at dusk, revealing brittle stars. Fires aside, Rickon's company marched silent, boots a hush. Midnight scouted ahead. Phalon lumbered behind carrying supply sleds. On fourth dawn, ravens broke above Treeline. Hundreds, croaking panic.
Rickon signaled halt.
Smell of pitch and singed flesh drifted. They crept over a ridge and froze. Below, Coral's force camped. For 100 sellswords in lacquered lamellar, 50 warlocks hooded, 15 wyverns tethered to iron stakes, tails capped in brass manacles. At camp center, a wagon borne on 6 mammoth scale wheels carried the Void Speaker, horn blacker than night, veined crimson, length thrick. Man, cables bound it tight. 3 warlocks painted symbols across its flanks. Jon's main host lagged day behind, only Rickon's 200 here. Surprised there's numbers not. Wait for Jon. Risk horn reaching barrow first. Rickon weighed the raven and wolf voices. Fear said wait. Hope said bite. He sketched plan in snow. 24 stealth archers circle left. Giants right to topple wyvern stakes. Runa leads spearwives on charge to split Sellsword shield wall. Rickon, Mira, Thea strike at horn wagon. Midnight finds Coral. Snow-muffled approach. Archers slid through birch shadows, drawing bows strung with sinew wrapped in wax. Giants moved like mountains learning stealth, each footfall cushioned by drift. Wyverns snorted, uneasy perhaps sensing dire wolf looming unseen. Then signal. Archers loosed. Arrow whistles became sudden rainfall. Warlocks shrieked. One fell clutching neck. Giants roared, ripping stake ropes, wyverns rearing confusion. Runa's spearwives leapt logs, shields raised, spears flashing like silver fish. Camp exploded in panic. Sellswords scrambling to ranks, warlocks bellowing spells. Rickon sprinted with strike team for wagon. A warlock hurled frost spear. Thea caught it on oak shield, shards shaving hair. Mira whipped a bolus. Stones cracked warlock's knees. They reached wagon, driver slain by stray arrow. Horn so vast up close, surface shimmered oily. As Rickon climbed axle, a hand seized rail. Menor Coral himself, obsidian scale mail gleaming. His eyes, black depth, flickered ember. Ice Wolf, he greeted, voice like clinking glass. Bring your true horn, we trade. Else I sound mine and gods choose. Rickon drew Longclaw. Trade Fong for Fong? Wolves do not barter with carrion crows. Coral smiled, showing filed teeth. Then die as pup. He lunged with sword forged of folded shadows. Edge hazy, occupying place and absence. Longclaw met it, sparks spraying spectral hues. Blades locked. Rickon felt cold and heat vie along steel. Coral whispered phrase. Shadowblade extended, trying to snake past guard. Rickon pivoted, smashing pommel to Coral's temple. Mask cracked, blood dark steaming. Coral stumbled but conjured flame from gauntlet. Fire coiled serpent-like. Rickon ducked, slashed knee. Shadowmail parted, veined red. Battle raged round, they fought center stage of swirling chaos. A wyvern broken free sword overhead, trailing chain. Giants hurled boulders at Sellsword phalanx. Warlocks cast frost sprays that turned men to statues only for spearwives to topple. Rickon dodged, pressed. Coral fainted, reached for horn. Rickon saw intent. If Coral could so much as mouth the flare, wards would quake. He roared, tackling warprints. They crashed to wagon bed, rolling among ropes. Coral spat blood, convulsed. Shadowblade arced up. Rickon caught wrist, but not before tip sliced shoulder. Cold fire licked wound. Pain fed rage. He headbutted Coral, smashed mask. Shards flew. Warprints hissed, face half burned, but eyes still coal. Rickon drew Eddard's thin Valyrian knife, buried it under Coral's ribs. The warprints arched, stiff, then collapsed, coughing brackish blood. No time, warlocks converged, chanting to animate horn themselves. Rickon sprang, severed first's throat. Mira shot second through eye. Thea grappled third to ground, crushed windpipe beneath knee. Giants now pushing wyverns toward camp edge. Runa's spearwives driving Sellswords into ravine. Victory near. Yet one dying warlock croaked final incantation. Palm on horn. A low thrum rolled like earth groaning. Cracks spidered horn's surface. Crimson veins glowed. Rickon understood. A self-breach. Horn would explode, its pulse reaching crypt regardless ward. He yelled retreat but echo drowned by rising keening. He climbed horn flank, driving Longclaw deep into vein lines, hoping to vent force upward. Blade absorbed power, trembling. Horn shrieked. Fissures widened. Runa saw, tossed coil of dragonglass chain. Rickon wrapped blade hilt to chain, anchored other end around wagon axle. Giants heaved wagon yoke, dragging horn sideways toward ravine. With monstrous groan, horn rolled off bed, chain jerking taut. Longclaw wedged, guiding Arkhorn tumbled down ravine wall. Warlock bodies cartwheeled after. Halfway down, crimson glow flared white boom. Snow blasted upward as geyser. Shockwave rippled ground. Trees bent, then sprang. Men stumbled, but ravine walls contained concussion. Stray pulse dissipated earthward, missing skyroot network. Within crypt miles north, chained horn quivered but held. Silence after roar seemed holy. Snow dust settled on battlefield where Sellswords surrendered, warlocks dead or fled. Wyverns, free of handlers, slunk into forest, tails trailing sparks until cold quenched. Rickon toppled to knees, shoulder wound throbbing. Midnight nudged him, Wolf's jaw still bruised yet determined. John's main host arrived dusk, finding victory already carved. Losses heavy but acceptable. Dawnspire barrow untouched. Runa propped Rickon up when healer's closed shoulder with dragonglass needle heated red. He grimaced but eyes remained clear. Raven voice louder tonight? She asked. Raven says soon, he answered, surprising himself. Shaggy Dog was silent, for first time since Bolton Arrows. Spring came early, as though Earth thanked them. Freehold orchards budded. Lakes cracked. Sellsward prisoners, offered bread and land, took oaths to till barrowlands they once marched to desecrate. Warlock remnants vanished east, though stories of wyvern sightings persisted. John abdicated title king in the north, proclaiming a council of 3 seats. Winterfell's seat for Northmen, Freehold seat for free folk, and Freebarrow seat chosen by mixed towns of new settlers. Rickon refused crown but accepted role marshal of the wardens, charged to guard boundaries between worlds. Living and dead, fire and ice. On summer solstice, under skies woven with green aurora, Rickon descended again to Horn Crypt. Sansa, Jon, Runa, Mira, giants and children from both peoples followed, bearing lanterns of warm fat and summer herbs. Before the chained horn they sang a simple song taught by an old free folk crone. Words without meaning, only cadence of heartbeat. Rickon laid palm on cold metal. It felt still, at peace, as though gate no longer strained. Raven voice whispered nothing. Wolf voice slept. He left horn chained, but bound fresh runes of unity. Copper discs hammered with symbols of elk, direwolf, Triskelion sign of Triune Council, hung along chain. Back in Godswood, they planted a new weirwood, graft of Winterfell's heart tree, and a pale sapling gifted by children rumored still hiding. 2 trunks twined, red and white roots drinking same soil. Rickon addressed gathered pack. Tonight we plant not to mark victory, but beginning. The north is not shield wall any longer. It is hearth. So long as we share fire, no dragon, no shadow, no winter can unmake us. They feasted on mammoth stew, cranberry cakes, sweet goat cheese. Giants told riddles. Free folk drummed, Northmen danced. Above, aurora flicked shapes, direwolf prowling, dragon coiling. Not at odds but circling, balance in motion. Rickon watched, shoulder scar itching less each moon. He thought of father's words long ago. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. He had chased those words through blood, ash, and sea spray until at last they fit like second skin. Not yet, perhaps never, would he sound the horn. Some gates stand to be guarded, not opened. Yet should the night dig fangs in earth again, wolves would answer. He lifted cup of warmed arbor wine, toasted sky. To bridges, not walls. To song, not horn. To wolves, free and bound alike. Voices echoed across Freehold Valley, rolling beneath starlit vault, weaving into wind that carried north over ice fields, south over barrow plains, east beyond shattered wall and sleeping night seed, west across sea where war ashes cooled. A wind-bearing promise. The north remembers, yes, but now it dreams, too. And in its dream, a boy who once ran barefoot across a killing field now walks tall among kin untold. No longer hunted arrows prey, but herald of dawn. Some stories end in crown or crypt. Rickon Starks would remain in footsteps on snow melting under first green shoot, in howl of wolf joined by stranger's whistle, in lullaby bells chiming at weirwood roots. For the pack had endured the storm and found new voice, a voice many-throated, speaking both ice and fire, shaping still soft clay of days to come. And in that shaping lay a truth stronger than horn blast, deeper than root, older than any skull-painted banner. Together we rise. Summer's mercy proved brief. By high harvest, iron-gray squalls rolled out of the shivering sea, tearing the orchard's first fruits from their branches before children's baskets could gather them. Each dawn Rickon woke beneath canvas that rattled like a smith's hammer on shields, and each night he fell asleep sprawled on furs still damp from rain that never decided whether it wished to be water or sleet. In Freehold, the Triune Assembly kept talking of barns and grain levies, but the restlessness in the wind said war. not winter, would ride the next gale. Scout horns confirmed it. Wreckage of still more black galleys drifted into the bight, hulks gutted by some storm too wild even for Coral's braziers. Yet the bodies that washed ashore bore fresh lash marks, not swell blisters. A war prince will murder his own crew rather than waste water on the doomed, Rickon thought grimly. And somewhere out beyond fog banks the prince was still breathing, plotting, hungry for a gate he did not understand. To match malice with vigilance, Rickon doubled Wolfwatch riders, posting relay outposts in every valley between Snowheart and the last river delta. They were to ring copper gongs at dusk and dawn, for strokes for shadows moving south, 8 for any sound of horn blast, even a cough echo far off across the snow. The gongs told most mornings for nothing more sinister than elk migrations. Then came a dusk struck with 10 strokes, so frantic the bronze tongues cracked. Rickon answered with his fastest muster yet. 800 swords, half free folk, half Northmen. 3 days' grain in each knapsack, no wagons. Sansa commanded Winterfell's remaining garrison. Jon rode at Rickon's side wearing cloak of black and white rag fur that snapped like a sail in the northerly gusts. Their destination was Coldmere Ford, a frog-swamped crossing on the crooked tributary that fed the shivering sea. There, the shattered fragments of Coral's host had coalesced about a ruin older than Barrows. An obsidian ziggurat that local shepherds claimed was the tail end of some great dragon that fell earthward in the Dawn Age. Warlocks had ringed the ruin with 50-foot stakes of petrified pine dipped in lampblack. Upon each stake fluttered flensed human skin, painted crimson with the horn skull. Wind made the skins flap like wings, a rustling so constant it drowned head noise. Night fell thick as pitch by the time Rickon's outriders spotted the blighted hill. He ordered torches snuffed. The army bivouacked low in tamarack bogs, sleeping on damp moss while watchmen perched in alder trees above chittering frogs. Before first light he and Runa paddled a dugout canoe upriver, scudding through mist so dense the water whispered unseen beneath them. They beached in reeds within bowshot of a guard post where 2 warlocks half-dozed, staffs wedged beneath armpits. Runa signed silently, easy kill. Rickon shook his head. He needed knowledge before blood. They waited until dawn's first glimmer pried at clouds, then slipped back downstream to camp and summoned Mira, whose sister Tuntung could mimic a dozen dialects. She painted her face ash gray, wove goat hair into dreadlocks, donned a torn warlock cloak, and crept into the guard ring marking herself with silt and slug slime. Rickon's fingers drummed hilt while he watched her vanish. An hour later she returned with a parchment rescued from a brazier and a tremor in her smile. Coral planned one last ritual, Hollow Nightfall, to be enacted on the next full moon, only 4 nights hence. The false horn had broken at Dawnspire Ravine, but warlocks had salvaged its molten shards and recast them into 13 smaller trumpets tuned to different pitches. Blown together at midnight, ringed round the ziggurat, they meant to call not for the gate below Rickon's horn but for every gate buried in forgotten earth. Cracks between realms that even the children never dared name. Success would shatter the line between Shadowfire and Greensong, enslaving every Weirwood's whisper to their creed. Failure would likely tear the veil open in a vortex of frost and ember, killing everything within a day's march. Either way Freehold fell. For nights, Rickon paced the bog edge where mud sucked at boots. They lacked siege engines, lacked time to starve the hill. A storm assault risked igniting the pine tar stakes. Wildfire traps rigged beneath. Came to the silent path or none. He summoned 5 trusted ghosts from the north. Jory Slatemouth, the stonemason ranger. Alice Snowfinger, the archer who could split spindle from chip in lamplight. Leaf Bearson, the youngest giant kin. Mira Long Seeks, and Runa Crow-Eater. They would infiltrate, kill, or steal the horns, and open the gate for the main host only when the warlocks broke formation. Failure meant howl no one would answer. At dusk of the 3rd day, the team approached in a howlless rain, their bodies smeared with bog mud so cold the oil beneath gooseflesh congealed. Alice carried bow and quiver of dragonglass broadheads. Jory wore carpenter's hammer and chisel. Mira hid 12 small firepots of Myrish smoke powder. Runa toted spear slender as reed but tipped with steel forged from fallen star. Leaf wore nothing but charblack paint and a necklace of carved femurs. Giant hide cannot quiet like leather, but Leaf could climb stone faster than men's scale ladder. They crossed the outer stake ring by crawling flat beneath Flen's skins that dripped congealed fat. One guard flicker looked their way. Alice loosed arrow. The guard toppled soundless. The ziggurat loomed 10 tiers high, steps steep as a cliff. Horn altars perched each tier's midpoint, cradling black trumpets bound in iron wire. Warlocks danced spiral paths between altars, scattering glassine flakes that glimmered like embers. The infiltrators waited while a patrol passed, then split. Alice and Mira scaling right flank, Jory and Runa left, Leaf straight up center where his bulk might pass for shadow among their torchlight illusions. Rickon crouched in reeds below, long claw drawn. A cloud peeled from moon, silvering the ruin. Leaf's colossal arm swept first horn from altar, crushing the warlock who keened to intervene. At once all torches flared cobalt. A ward broken. Alarm hollers echoed. Horns not yet lifted blasted discordant bursts. Rickon sprang from cover, signaling the army to surge. Free swords burst from tamarack gloom, shields raised. Northmen shouted winter, free folk answered wolf. Bolts and spears volleyed. Warlocks hurled frostlances that cleaved armor as easily as cloth. Giants fought hawthorn stakes, ripping them out by roots that bled ember sap. The battlefield glowed like a forest of burning icicles. Rickon climbed the serpentine stair, parrying frost blasts that cracked stone. He found Mira wounded at 4th tier, smoke pot spent. She pressed shard-filled viscera with trembling hand yet grinned through blood. Took 2 horns down. Rickon kissed her brow in vow of vengeance. Moved on. Runa and Jory reached 7th tier, prizing trumpet from altar. Iron wires hissed, lashing like serpents of hot metal. Jory hammered chisel to cut last coil. Wire snapped, slashing his cheek. Trumpet clanged down steps. Runa kicked it further, shouting for Leaf who heaving hauled horns in burlap sack like fisher hauling nets of Leviathan. But warlocks had enough left. On 10th tier 5 horns remained. 5 warlocks circled them chanting to quicken, frost rippling from each step they kissed. Between chants one slit his palm atop trumpet bell. Blood froze, crystallized. Rickon sensed resonance building. He sprinted, shoulder wound from coral tearing anew. At tier 8 he battered aside staff wielder whose skull burst on stone. At tier 9 2 wyverns, muzzled in iron spines, lunged from shadows. Midnight and a pair of giant direwolves engaged, teeth on scales, snarls ringing. Rickon reached final staircase. 5 warlocks turned, eyes sapphired, their tongues stitched. They sang through minds instead of mouths, a harmony of razors. Air iced, breath crystallized to tinkling flakes. He felt veins stiffen but pressed. First warlock launched spear of condensed shriek. Rickon deflected with long claw, pivoted, slid blade across belly. Silk parted, entrails steamed. Second warlock spun chain of knives. Rickon ducked, severed Achilles. Warlock toppled. Third warlock exhaled plume of night, but Runa emerged, star spear piercing chest, light bursting from spine. Fourth warlock dashed in fury, stabbing obsidian dagger. Jory blocked with hammer haft. Rickon countered strike at eyeball. Dagger clattered. Warlock fled only to meet Leaf's fist. Fifth warlock, their leader, grasped 2 horns, one to either hand, and sounded both at once. The note tore mountain stillness, not loud but razor-fine. Rickon felt it inside sternum. Chains hundreds of leagues away shivered. Runa dropped to knee, blood from ear. Jory clutched temples. Leaf howled, smashing stone. Rickon closed, every step heavy as sorrow. The warlock's horns linked by black fire. Flames licked along leader's arms, searing flesh, but he did not show pain. He raised horns again. Rickon hurled Eddard's thin Valyrian knife. Blade spun silver, punching through warlock's stitched throat. Sound gurgled, horns slipped. Rickon cleaved arms at elbow. Horns tumbled, bouncing down tear faces, spinning into dark. Note died. Silence heavy as snowfall blanketed ziggurat. Warlock's torso collapsed, slithering frost blood. Moment held, then horns lying at bottom cracked, glass inside them fracturing. A pulse billowed, less than before but enough. A ring of frostfire radiated from ruin, turning grass beyond stake line to glass. But wards under Winterfell's horn did not break. Rickon exhaled misty relief. He surveyed carnage. Warlocks extinguished, horns shattered, altars toppled. Only charred stone remained of their dream. At dawn, storm cleared, revealing blue sky seldom seen. Sun warmed frost into glitter. Survivors gathered on lower tier. Mira had died of gut wound but wore contented smile, eyes still open to dawn. They burned her on altar stones, smoke trailing like banner of freedom. Rickon addressed assembly hoarsely. Coral is gone, but others wear his cloak. They will rise as long as men fear winter and hunger for power. We cannot tear every horn, for new horns can be forged. Instead we teach. Show them that ice and fire do not war, they dance. Show them wolves guard dance floor. Laughter rumpled through grief. They marched home singing mournful harmony taught by Mira. 7 years rolled, seasons each stranger than last. Summers windy, winters wet, springs simmering with fireflies no maester recorded. Yet the pack endured. Freehold grew to rival White Harbor, its half-moon bay ringed by drydock ramps big enough to cradle giant galleys. The Triune Assembly codified open-fire law. Any sorcerer found forging horn shards would face Rial by ice, free folk jury, and fire, northern lord jury. 2 verdicts required to convict. It proved deterrent enough that warlock cults fled to Essos by next dusk. Rickon aged into lean battle-scarred man, but his eyes still shone wolf gold. He married no one, though Sisterton ballads claimed he wed the sea. Children called him Uncle Wolf. He taught them to read runes before letters so they'd know roots of story. John resigned marshal seat after 5 years, traveling east on wooden skiff with Red Priest Thurs's niece to spread tales of Pax peace. Sansa remained Winterfell's lady, guiding law. Runa became Freehold's first shield thane, forging curriculum for guard wives and husbands alike. She outgarbed lords in bear fur trimmed with ass-high pearls. Leaf Bearson built a stone bridge over Shivering Strait so elephants from Summer Isles could one day cross. None came, but dream mattered. Of Coral nothing more reached ravens, save whispers from Mask Islands that a one-eyed man preached to shadows. Rickon kept changeless watch, nightly pacing Godswood path. Sometimes he paused over crypt vent where Horn lay. Sometimes he smiled, hearing only roots grow. On 10th anniversary of Battle of the Ziggurat, they held Convergence Feast, open to every soul north of the Neck. 10,000 thronged Freehold Plaza. 7 pyres roasted mammoth, boar, salmon the size of children. Giant jugglers tossed men. Spearwives sang raunchy songs. Maesters told shy jokes. Fireworks, varying hues made from crushed God's hard dust neutralized by prayer, burst overhead, no harm. Midnight, graying muzzle but bright eyes, lay at Rickon's feet while he shared honey-mulled wine with orphans. One asked, "Where is your horn, Lord? Why hide it if it saves us?" He ruffled her hair. "A key opens and closes," he said. "But a key left unused reminds us door is still there. We live by choice, not cage." The girl nodded but pointed at sky where Aurora painted spiral shapes. "Door big," she whispered. Rickon followed her finger. In the lights he imagined shapes. Raven, wolf, dragon, and something else. The nightseed root maybe healed green. He felt scar along ribs itch, but soft like old friend. A breeze rustled. Bells at Weirwood rang single clear note. Rickon lifted cup, toasted silent watchers. Father, mother, Rob, Mira, Bran wherever his wings flew. He knew storms would come again, storms always. But now when thunder rolled, it would echo across bridges built of bone and bark and promises sworn in blood and laughter. And on those bridges children of ice and fire would dance, unafraid of shadows because wolves kept watch. He stood, letting festival swirl around, and set cup on table so another might drink. Midnight rose beside him, tail thumping. Together they crossed plaza toward Godswood, not to guard, but simply to breathe where roots spoke. The moon crowned walls with silver. Lanterns swung, hush settling as dawn threatened horizon. Rickon inhaled scent of pine resin, distant hearth smoke, damp river rock, and one other new shoots breaking soil. He smiled and whispered to Wolf, "Smells like spring." Midnight's answering howl melted into sky, and if somewhere behind the aurora a raven answered or a horn stirred, Rickon heard only the laughter of children chasing fireflies across freshly sprouted grass, and he decided that for tonight, that was song enough. 7 further years slipped through the north like meltwater through granite fissures. Quiet, persistent, reshaping more than any avalanche. Freehold's wharves sprawled into a crescent of stone and pine, its tallest watchtower tipped with a copper wolf's head that caught dusk and flashed red as a dragon's eye. Wheat once wary in shallow furrows now rolled in ripples clear to the treeline, and mule caravans took the giant bridge Leaf built as though it had always spanned the strait. Small folk swore you could smell honeyed bread from Winterfell clear to the coast on market days. Rickon felt that sweetness each time he crossed the parapets, the same way a maester might listen to pulse beneath bandages, pleased but alert for tremors. Peace this broad war seems. Refugees from broken Valyrian colonies still arrived in spurts, and every autumn some green boy put on a black skull mask for mischief only to discover the Freehold militia gave no quarter for shadows. Yet most threats were small, poachers, storms, an outbreak of greylung in the mining camps south of the Wall Scar. His dire counsel kept watch. He chased only the calls that smelled of deeper rot. So when 3 riders from Last Hearth arrived wild-eyed under a new moon, Rickon knew at once which seam had split. They spoke of a merchant train gone missing on the King's Road, 40 carts, 5 giants, 37 children among them, vanished without ember, track, or scream. No sign but one. A spiral of flayed elk hides staked in the frost-hard earth, each hide branded with a crescent that was half horn, half moon. Sansa gathered lords the next dawn beneath Winterfell's rafters. Jon had sailed west years earlier, yet his crown, now symbolic only, still hung above the high seat. Rickon stood where the sun climbed through arrow slits, arms crossed while the assembly fretted. Lord Manderly swore it was Bolton Scions returned. Lady Dustin muttered of slavers from Bravos. Only Runa, gray-streaked braid heavy down her back, spoke what stirred behind Rickon's ribs. Hollow nightfall never died. It shelters under new moon. The chamber hushed. Rickon saw disbelief but also fear that faith might be true. He issued orders before doubt found breath. The Wolf Watch to seal every ford south of the last river. Freehold's garrison to cleanse the King's Road mile by mile, dragging torches of pine tar and dragonglass. A covert spear, 30 of the quickest minds and quietest feet, to hunt the vanished caravan's trail beyond the dread spiral. He would lead that spear himself. They rode light and silent. Rickon, Runa, Alice Snowfinger, older now yet deadlier with her ash bow, Leaf Bearson who could still scale cliffside faster than any ladder, plus 25 timber wolves of flesh and will. Men and women who'd proven themselves at Ziggurat and on every border since. For 5 nights they followed nothing but scattered embers in the moss, sign that cookfires had been quenched quick, and ruts in earth bent wrong way, as though carts dragged backward by unseen beasts. The forest itself grew uneasy. Owls silent, toadstools blackened at edges. On the 6th twilight they found the first cage. Iron ribs large enough to house giant calves, welded to sled runners. Inside lay only a cracked mastiff collar and a smear of blood turned to rusty lace. Alice knelt, pressing palm to the stain. Fresh 3 days, she judged. Whatever herded them dragged southeast, toward Widow's Fong. Widow's Fong was a knife of basalt jutting above Kettle Lake's legends claimed drank moonlight. No settlement lay there, only scree fields and sinkholes where miners once sought dragonglass veins before flames and gases boiled them alive. By moonrise they reached the first sinkhole, wide as Winterfell's yard. Cart tracks ended at the rim yet reappeared on the far side. The caravan had detoured around. Beyond, the land dipped, and lantern glow flickered against boulders.
Rickon signaled halt, belly simking.
Leaf crawled forward on elbows despite frame like a cottage. He returned with voice a cracked whisper. Children alive in pit, warlocks ring above, chanting low. Rickon's blood iced. He pictured Coral's shards, 13 trumpets. Long since smashed, but warlocks were smiths of echo. What new instrument waited? Runa rasped, "We strike now." Yet Alice tapped arrow fletch. Too many eyes. Free the young first, or they die in crossfire. Rickon closed eyes, listening. Shaggy Dog silent. Brand's raven nothing. Only hearts around him, beating pulse of one pack. He opened eyes. "We craft a shadow." They unpacked 3 tar casks carved from pine. Wolves painted themselves in pitch, draping torn cloaks to mimic flayed banners. Leaf hoisted a broken mast from cart wreckage. Alice affixed to its tip an elk hide spiral drawn hastily in dust soot. When ready, Leaf and 2 giants strode into sight chanting a bastardized warlock drone, dragging tar casks that smoked acrid green once set ablaze. Instantly robed sentries hailed. First suspicion, then rapturous cheers. The giants, masked, lifted empty hands as if offering tribute. Warlocks descended with iron hooks to haul casks. While they wrestled chains, Rickon's true spear slipped round sinkhole rim opposite, cutting tethers that bound cage lids. Hands over frightened mouths, they eased children down rope ladders into a limestone fissure where Runa waited with blankets and hushed songs. They freed 28 before alarm pierced. 1 tar cask toppled, void inside revealed. A warlock screeched. Blue fire bled from staff tip. Rickon ripped long claw from sheath. Shadows sprang to steel. Leaf roared, hurling false banner like javelin into Mage's chest. Tar flames caught robes. Panic rippled. Battle swarmed along pit rim. Dragonglass arrows felled chanters. Warlocks unleashed frost arcs. Moss burst crystals. Rickon cleaved a path, severing arms that tried to raise horns smaller than those at Ziggurat but carved of translucent green stone. He took its keeper's head, kicked horn into sinkhole. Below, children and Runa shielded by stone lip. Horn struck rock, cracked with a chime then lay still, silent but not dead. Faint pulse radiated, spidering through limestone. Sinkhole stirred, dust trickling. Rickon's gut clenched. No time. He signaled retreat. Wolves hoisted children onto backs, scrambled upslope. Warlocks rallied, unleashing woven wind that whipped arrows aside. Stones lifted like hail. Alice turned, loosing arrow after arrow. She fell when 1 stone crushed shoulder, but 3 warlocks with her. At ridge top the spear regrouped. Sinkhole below yawned wider, shale plate collapsing. From cracked horn leaked vapor luminous and cold. A roar echoed up throat of earth, like wind trapped since dawn age. Rickon thrust child into Runa's arms, vaulted back down path. He snatched tar-soaked banner stump, wrapped it round horn, hefted bundle burning his palms. Limestone floor buckled. Root like worms of ice licked his boots. He threw horn into widening gulf, slammed tar stump after, flame devouring vapor. Light imploded, silent flash, then pit sealed as though mouth clenched, leaving only smolder trail. Rickon staggered clear moments before surface flattened, dust settling in hush nearly holy. They limped home over 9 days. 28 children saved, giant casualties too, Alice alive but maimed. Of warlocks none pursued. Their camp husk found 2 dawns later empty save scorched spirals. In freehold healers cleaned wounds with pine pitch and birch spirit. Maester Rickon inspected fragment of greenstone horn Runa salvaged. A sliver no bigger than thumb. He blanched, called it ghost stone. Mined from sainted depths in ass-high, rumored grown where shadow fire meets sea ice. Such horns did not call gates. They whispered sleep into any living heart, bidding it open to possession. Children, Rickon breathed. Host bodies. Likely, Rickon confirmed. Council demanded any leftover ghost stone shards tracked and pulverized. Wolfwatch scoured roads, dragging magnet chains. They burned spiral stakes to ash, salted char. Weeks passed, threat seeming quelled. Yet one twilight ringing of low bell outside Freehold's infirmary drew Rickon at run. He found Alice, bandaged, propped on cot, gasping fitful breaths. Nurse said arrow fever broken, should be restful. Alice's eyes, once hazel, now greenstone hue, She seized Rickon's wrist with unnatural strength, hissed words foreign. The root drinks still. The bud will bloom. King Wolf, your gate or all gates. Then pupils contracted to pinpoints. She slumped, heart stilled. Runa stalked in, hearing last whisper. Rickon met her gaze, understanding bleak. Ghost stone had seeded inside arrow wound fragments. Though Maester scraped clean, dust enough slid blood-rich to heart. Not possession message. Rickon ordered pyre built of ironwood logs soaked in myrish pitch. Alice burned quick, hot, leaving only arrowheads he buried at sea boundary stones. He spent night atop Freehold Tower, scanning aurora. At second bell he felt horns chain stir, subtle tremor. Shaggy dog restless. Raven wing brushed mind. Not gates but root. The night seed, Rickon murmured. Snow again dusted hills by the time Rickon deciphered Warlock's script cut on elk hides. Coordinates not of sinkholes but ocean floor, somewhere off Skagos' misted shoals. There, a ridge called Drowned Spine rose. Myths spoke of tree roots petrified to basalt under eons of tide. Ghost stone cults sought to bud night seed in salt cracks, letting sea carry spores along weirwood rootnet beneath continental shelf, subverting forests from below unseen. Rickon summoned the crossing tide, Freehold's stoutest icebreaker galley, hull sheathed in whalebone lamella. Crew, Runa first mate, Leaf as deck strength, Serafini, older, penitent, called Witchward now. To read sea sigils, 20 Wolfwatch Marines, 10 giants to heft anchor. He left Freehold to Sansa's steady command, kissed children's brows, promised swift return. Winter waves smashed foothills of ice, frost spray armored beards, Serafini red currents, violet swirls of phosphor signaled ghost stone seep. Like lantern fish gut, she said. On third night they reached Spine, basalt pillars breaking surface like dragon ribs. Moon hid. Only storm lanterns cast sickly lumens. Soundings showed hollow below, cavern the size of Maidenpool Cathedral. Rickon ordered launch of 2 skin boats. He, Runa, Serafini, and Leaf descended rope ladders to maw where tide inhaled. Inside, cavern walls pulsed faint turquoise. Floor a carpet of root-like tendrils crystallized, tips budding bulbous sacs night seed spawn. Among them knelt warlocks in trance, arms buried elbow-deep feeding blood to bulbs. Ghost stone horns half-grown jutted from stems like tusks. Serafini whispered, "Cut root crown, the lesser die." Crown lay deeper, beneath tide pool glowing with cold fire. Leaf waded thigh-deep, parting bulbs. Water bit like knives. At pool center protruded a nucleus. Tree heart fused with stone, slashed by runes older than first men. From it a stalk lifted, horn flanged not by smith but grown bone. Rickon climbed nucleus spur. Shaggy dog howled in mind. Brand's raven silent, permission or farewell. He raised long claw, edge glimmering aurora cast through hole above. Runa steadied rope anchored to cavern lip. Serafini began incantation of unmaking. Leaf braced. He struck root crown. First blow rang dull. Second split bark stone. Luminescent ichor spurted. Warlocks screamed waking. Cavern trembled. Bulbs burst, their ghost stone horns keening. Third blow severed crown. Shockwave like tidal bore rolled outward. Water vortexed, dragging bulbs, warlocks, everything, into inner fissure newly open. Rickon lost footing. Leaf's hand caught belt, hauled him up as chasms sucked sea. Runa cut rope. They scrambled for ladder barely before cavern folded, pillars collapsing. Above, crossing tide pitched violently as ocean funneled downwards, then spewed geyser of frost steam. Crew hauled heroes aboard right as whirlpool sealed. Sea calmed disturbingly fast. Where cavern opened, only smooth swirl of brine remained, luminous dust diffusing. Serafini slumped on deck, nose bleeding. Night seed burned, she rasped. Roots salted, but hornroot may sprout else if gardeners remain. Rickon gazed east where dawn threatened gray. Will guard soil. He sheathed sword. They returned to cheers yet bore news of cost. Wolfwatch casualties 6, Leaf frostbit but healed. Warlock remnants scattered south across narrow sea. But North's tree songs quieted, their leaves whispering only wind again. Rickon walked Freehold's Godswood that twilight, alone save midnight's offspring, ghost-white pups darting around root buttresses. He pressed hand to chained horn, still, restful. He thanked silent raven, stroked shadow of shaggy dog memory. He thought of bridges, wood and bone and trust, spanning depths where monsters burrow. Bridges must stand, or new horns will rise. He set mind to next season's tasks. Teach children of both bloods to weave dragonglass thread into fishing nets. Map every petrified route beneath coastline with whale song echo craft. Train pack to read aurora ripples as maesters red ravens. For shadows adapt, so must wolves. He knelt beneath twin-trunk heart tree where red and white limbs twined, leaves dipped brushing his scarred cheek. He whispered a promise. When darkness knocks again, door will find no hinge, only teeth. Wind answered in quiet sigh, carrying far wolf howl echoed by distant human voices, indistinguishable now after years of song shared. Rickon rose, feeling dawn's gold behind eyelids. Tomorrow fields awaited threshing, roads demanded mending, and children pestered for stories of sinking of ghost stone horns. He would give them truth, that courage is no blast of prophecy but the steady act of standing between gate and abyss each waking day. He strode from Godswood into burgeoning light, pups racing ahead, tail barks scattering ravens into air bright with beginning.